Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, we are pleased to welcome our National Grand Sheikh, Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam. Thank you all for coming out. One of the things, and we can continue even in the conversation that we have, because a lot of people aren't even aware of the connection of all of those things. They look at them as different subject matters. Anyway, one of the things that we wanted to discuss is the issue that many people aren't aware that the two parties operating at North America as the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are actually both subdivisions of the Ku Klux Klan. You know, and it's very important for people to know because number one, most people don't suspect it. All scholars know it, all politicians know it, people in secret societies know it. They've been living off the virtues of the people of the land and others in general by keeping them ignorant. More and more people are trying in different ways and manners to try to liberate themselves mentally and most pointedly economically. They're talking economics, when truthfully they don't know what economics are, which we will get into at another time. But that is true. But on a surface, I'll tell you, economics is mathematics. Economics is indeed mathematics and is approached from a mathematical perspective. Even when you're dealing with a knowledge of the movement of the planets and the ecology on the Earth, the growth patterns of everything, including the operation of the womb. When you're looking at the plant life, understand that in the science of life, the womb is included with that study. The same study on another level, or on what you call a Masonic degree, which is a higher level of knowledge, limited to few. When they say if you're a farmer and you're planning, and you must be anyway, meaning that even if you don't deal with horticulture, if you're in the political realm of dealing with resources, you must know the fundamentals of the almanac, because you have to see to it that the greater family, which is called the nation state, is fed. Plus you trade with other nation states for products they may have, and they with products that you may have. This goes on the planet. Therefore, you must have a knowledge of economy, right? So therefore, to understand the movements and the growth of plant life, whether you're dealing with root plant, stem plant, because these are foods, right? Leaf and seed, etc. You're dealing at all times with fecundity and fertility concerning the planet Venus and the moon and their cycles in relationship to the earth, conjunct with the operations of the earth in its relationship to the sun. And so this shows growth patterns, and they are mathematically charted. Are we clear? So not only do you look at, now they would not, as an example, the dark priesthood would not present to you, the masses, that the womb is included in the almanac, except in your higher degrees. So in the almanacs for the masses, they would just talk about the plants and the fish. So they talk about the currents on the earth, the studied currents on the earth, the different soils on the earth, alkaline, acidic, etc. The time periods to plant the time periods to harvest, and understand in your Hebraic texts, when you're dealing with Torah, Tanakh, etc., Pentateuch, these are actually based on agriculture. When you're looking at a lot of the symbols that are used in religion, they have much to do with cosmology and agriculture. Provable fact, not taught. Are we clear? However, it also includes the womb, that they don't include in the books for the masses, but the high priests get it for themselves, because they must govern. Are we clear? Now, problem that you have is that the priesthood, 99% of them are dark. That's why the world's in the shape it's in. You have only a handful of honorable priests, or people with pure hearts that are really on the planet to liberate humanity, or to try to make their walk easier. And among them are usually picked the ones that they call prophets and seers, etc. And usually the other side of the priesthood murder them. That's how they've been keeping their power. Are we clear? And then they say the devil did it, which is a tool of the priesthood more than a reality. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And then they build codes around these abstracts and present them to the masses under gods and devils. And this is why the masses, in the name of religion, are always talking about gods and devils, while saying there's one God, but it's always gods. But there's only one God, but it's always gods. And then the devil did it and took your sandwiches, you know. And the devil's the one that took your bicycle, and the devil's the one who took your grandmom's house. Instead of that, it was the priesthood who run the IRS for the Jesuit order under the popes of Rome, under the Nicene Council, and the Roman Curia, under the Global Estate Trust that's operating on the planet, not on some daggone cloud. So to keep your mind off of that, they divert you to the mystery gods and the mystery devils. Meanwhile, they interject one of their priests to always be the middleman to collect finance from you in the name of money, while telling you that money is the root of all evil, but give me as much as you can for Jesus' half. And they've been getting away with this for centuries. Meanwhile, the people are miserable, families are broke up, the people's liberties are converted into privileges and licenses, all unalienable rights and birthrights are being tread upon by the priesthood, who have different names, you know, politicians. And so the people have the idea that the politicians are priests because they don't use the name on the surface. They're all priests. Are we clear? So this is why all of them must be Masons, Eastern Stars, Knights Templars, Knights of Columbus, Knights of Malta, Thule Society, etc., Tavistock. All of them are Masons. Now Mason simply means, and again, a lot of the negative goes on the planet, and so people give Masonry a bad name. Masonry should not be mistaken by you. It is simply a platform by which the more higher degrees of knowledge of the human experience on the planet is preserved. Are we clear? However, that knowledge can be used to the negative or to the positive. And very often people give Masonry a negative name for the persons who are part of it, who have been abusing the world, not to be confused. Are we clear? It's sort of like the water is not bad, although you can drown in it, but you need it to live. It's the same principle. What we're talking about is misuse. Are we clear? And because these priests have been so evil, people have a tendency to charge the information as opposed to the persons who are misusing the information. Are we clear? So I just want to throw that at you because it's very important to recognize, because even without us going into it deeper, you as women, you know, when you're looking at an almanac that's used by people all around the planet to grow food, to plan, harvest, Thanksgiving is representative of harvest. Christmas is representative of the death of the harvest period. And that's true. Spring is represented, the vernal equinox, as the life beginning. Again, that's really the new year. When the sun and Venus passes over the horizon. That's why they call it Passover, and they call it the star is now in the east, Ishtar, etc. When you understand these things, that they're really cosmology, there's also moral stories that are applied to them, but that's for children. And it's also for adults to learn from. But at the same time, you must understand it's really cosmology. But you also must understand, put your womb and take and chart it right along with the plant life, and you'll understand yourself better. And you'll understand also family planning better. And you'll also know how to build the temples of Solomon, soul of man, temples for the soul of man better. So the temple of Solomon is our bodies. It's incomplete only because of the salts that are missing for the last 3 months, that we're not in the womb, because you give us the triplicity of 3. So you give us the 9 moons cycles, or the 9 months. And so wherever you begin, the last 3 of the cycle of 12 is the salts and energies weren't given to us in the womb, so that's what we need to study to give us those energy to complete the Solomon's temple. This is where what you will call medicines in your food have their origin. So when you know these things, you know how to heal. It ain't no mystery. I just want to throw that at you, because if you just start thinking, you already know. I'm just kind of rattling you up a little bit. But also trying to put it to you in a way that's not hard to understand. Once you start thinking about it, it makes sense. This is why, like, even when women cycle, they call it a monthly, because it's really governed by the moon. So why not understand yourself? Why be afraid of yourself simply because some dark priest trying to control your womb? You already know that you spot like 7 days and 7 days, there and after type thing, right in harmony with the ruling planets. You could count that. Damn pill. Truthfully, I'm just saying, if you really understand your body, the dark priesthood has really been damaging women by not telling them the truth about themselves. That's why they give you dogmata in the name of religion, so you can follow the priesthood, and then they control your life, and they have investment in the stock for the pills that they give you and poison you. Control the womb. And so even when you look at that, and the uterus by the popes of Rome. It's a divine contract from God, Jesus, and Allah, and everything like that. It belongs to the priesthood. And then they have what you call layers of the priesthood coming down to the municipalities, and they are set up to steal birthrights. They're not set up to serve you. They're set up to tax you and to steal your estate. This is why they mistreat women. And this is also why they don't have women in your highest levels of the priesthood. Because the nature of life on the planet itself is a matriarchy, not a mere opinion. If you study nature, it's obvious. Right? So you go in the woods, you go to say, an ant mound or a termite, mound, or, you can dig it up and you can find usually a queen's chamber. You don't have no king's chamber in there. They got some other females that they may feed and then make them drones, or what we call males. That's where we come from. Now, so they don't want you to kind of like know that we are females made as your mate. You made us yourself. This is why we're referred to as the sons of God. But then you got to know who God is. God is really yourself. Once you really understand that even Allah, Elohim, etc., is a feminine word. So it's really talking about the generative forces. is talking about the gateways to life, and therefore it is your mother. And your belly button is your only proof of, you can claim any beliefs that you want to, y'all got that going on. You know, I really feel as though the double cheeseburger is my God. Did you hear me? I sing. I really feel as though the double cheeseburger is my God. And there's no other burger like cheesy burger. And everybody says, amen. Now, in real truth, that is just as valid as anybody else's claim about any other idol gods that they may have. I don't care what you call them. Because the only proof that you have, if you want to make an argument, is your belly button. Now, you can deny it, but your argument will not stand against it. Because everything else you say is speculation. It doesn't mean that you haven't accepted things. And it doesn't mean that whether you believe it or not, I'm not even arguing that. I'll give you that. I'll give me that. We got that going on. Put your neck underneath a guillotine and show proof you're God. And not by another man's word, by your own word. Let the guillotine come down. Let that blade chop your head off. Watch how quick they'll say, I got a belly button. Yeah, we only said that because, man, it's going to make some burger out of me and stuff. The real deal, because the real deal, that's true. And I don't want to burn you on that, but on the same point, I want to get into the two-party system, etc., that people assume to be their government or their governing bodies, etc. How many of you know what Kaikos is? We're going to talk because we want to go, Dr. Nail.
Kaikos is also the KKK, one of those types of groups.
Okay.
The Ku Klux Klan, the Kaikos, and all those are those extremist groups.
Well, you know, I'm reluctant to feed into the general narrative where they call everything extremist.
Right. Well, I don't think we are.
No, I'm just saying, because usually it's a trap when you follow whatever their narrative is. I'm not saying that they are or not.
Okay.
I'm just saying, use your thoughts on what you know.
That's what I meant.
You know what I mean? And a synopsis in lesson book number 1, and I want to thank you again, appreciate with the work that you're doing in the background. You know, you're not forgotten for the integrity and the honor and the hard work that you do in the background. I just want you to know that. Yeah. But who are Moorish Americans? Moors defined, and I'll remind you again, these were heavily edited, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do them, because I'm going to put the old notes in there, because most of these are about half of what they were. All right? That's, again, why I didn't do a lot of stuff in between. But thankfully, Dr. Naila and Sister Tamara showed up. Because they got it going on. Anyway, what about the Ku Klux Klan? Now, I'm going to give you just a synopsis, and I wrote this as a synopsis because I know that a lot of our people, of the Asiatics, the Aboriginals of the land, etc., who have been suffering at the hands of Kaikos, the Ku Klux Klan, have a tendency, just like others, is not good. Do you understand? Even with an enemy, there's no need to lie. Do you understand? Meaning that if you have an enemy, you don't need to talk about the grandma. I'm talking about she wears high heel green sneakers when just because you're trying to make them angry, or or trying to get back at them. Or if they've injured you or tortured you or trespassed you, speak to the trespass. Because nature, to come to aid you, for the ancient ones and the spirits of our ancient mothers and fathers come to your aid. You can't be a liar while calling another a liar.
It's called honor.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's not necessary. Just tell the truth. However, I just want to mention this to you. So I'll give you a synopsis background. All right? Synopsis. What about the Ku Klux Klan? Operations and Principles, 1868. And I want to remind you, which is not in this notes, but will be in the other notes. 1868, that date's very important, and this is why once in a while we're talking, I'll go over those things about a synopsis of the history of contemporary operations of the Inquisition hegemony in the North Gate, which is often referred to by the common people who are controlled by the narrative makers as white supremacy. What you're dealing with is the European Spanish Inquisition hegemony. That's what you're dealing with. All right? The Ku Klux Klan is one of the two largest of the secret organizations of Christendom, i.e. the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. Of North America during the period of Reconstruction. You must equate Reconstruction with expurgatorius and librorum expurgatorius, librorum prohibitorum, or what is referred loosely as the great book burnings, or them helping to put the world deeper into darkness. Are we clear? So they block information, which is why this is a good lesson to you. While I'm going into the Ku Klux Klan, for a lot of people, just as you demonstrated this, Jay, right? I was always here early for Jay because G did it. Anyway, it is all related. Now, from a historical point of view, from a priesthood point of view, from a Masonic point of view, none of this stuff is disconnected. And so when you think, or when you're approaching political, economic problems, all of these facets are a canvas to you. To the general masses who are absent of this knowledge, they're thinking in tunnel vision of a Federal Reserve note, which isn't even money when it comes to economies. They never applied logistics, which is the principle that is applied into all sciences by all scholars, all PhDs, all high priests, all politicians, and they're trained in it, which gives them the upper hand. Logistics are and is the fundamental principle in any science to break down the component parts of anything, study the individual component parts of anything, any chemistry, any language, any substance, any operation, any political structure in their individual component parts, analyze its nature, its purpose, its consistency, its strength, its weaknesses, same with the next piece, and then put them all back together to understand the whole. That's called engineering, that's called logistics. That applies in language. In language, it would be called etymology. In substance, it would be called chemistry, alchemy. Alchemy would be more with the chemistry crossing over into the abstract. Are we clear? So chemistry comes from alchemy, and that you would be dealing with both the mind energy and some physicalities, and that area in between. You would be dealing kind of in what you would call the abstract and the spiritual world, and understanding how high priests work, pretty much like Dr. Hannibal teaches. You're going into what you call the metaphysics, and that's our culture. However, I'm going to say this to you. You know and I know that the masses don't get that. It's not that they don't hear about these things. It's not taught to them. Why? Because somebody wants to rule over them. And the same people talking about they're educating them, or they love them, or they want to lead them to God type thing. No, they don't. They want your cookies. And let them not lay hands upon you either. Don't play with that. Right. Most they're perverts anyway. Most of them. And they eat your babies.
Yeah.
Like for real.
Yeah.
Like for really real.
Yeah.
Like really, really real.
Talk about the burger stuff you go.
Mm-hmm.
About the burger and DNA.
Now, for those who may not know, and this has to do with a lot of the Asiatics, the North Gate, the Ku Klux Klan's official role and official title is the Grand Protectors of the Christian Creed. The Grand Protectors of the Christian Creed. And so you wonder why Reverend Pigfoot is amongst his own people promoting the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed for the Ku Klux Klan in the name of Jesus, and wonder why your communities are doing so bad. Once you understand certain aspects of history and truth, you can unwind this thing. But if you never think, or someone who knows never points it out to you, you can spend your whole lifetime working against yourself and your family and don't even know it. Once you understand these things, you understand it's a political system having nothing to do with your spiritual development whatsoever. Doesn't mean that Europeans should reject it. That's there for their earthly salvation, for world conquest. Don't get mad at them. A colonist is a parasite. So his relationship with you will be parasitic. It's not whether he don't like you. His plan is to steal your sandwiches. And the plate that they go on. Oh, he's racist. He don't like my color. No, race is the human species, and he wanted to take your house, your land, and your property. That's what his relationship with you is. So your issue should not be trying to convince him to like you, or to convince him to like your skin. Your issue should be decolonization. I repeat, your issue should be decolonization. And all things for remedy should be around that area. Anything else is a diversion from solution. If you're suffering from, you're swimming in the yard and everything, lake, because you got a lake in the yard, you backstroking, got this. And then you come out on the other side and everybody say, hey, I never knew you had moles and freckles. You look in the mirror and you see all these things on you. They're probably leeches. I suggest you start pulling them off. European colonists under the Spanish Inquisition hegemony are parasites to anyone they attach to. And it's called betting. They use a term, and this is a term they actually use, called betting, B-E-D, betting. Befriend, embrace, devour. Befriend, embrace, devour. This is also in the symbolism of the corruption, like you'll see in the Septuaginta. In their Septuaginta in the Bible, they refer to themselves as the harlot. And anyone who goes to bed with the harlot, they get burnt. And then as justice comes, or Jesus comes, was a password, justice comes, all that must burn or be overthrown. Meaning that if you ain't talking decolonization in one way or another, then you ain't talking about solution. Now, the job or the controlling the narrative is to keep you talking about everything but the solution. Which is why this problem with European colonialism under the name, false name, and false narrative of racism and color problems and prejudice, false directive, has solved absolutely nothing for generations, and you see worse and worse and worse conditions for the people of the land, including the youth dying younger and younger. Relationships don't work, families are breaking up, they gentrify the communities, and the people are sitting around following Reverend Pigfoot, who they don't know, 32-degree Mason. He knows the truth himself. He got a Moorish fez, and he got a certificate that says Assalamu Alaikum, and he has what they refer to as a holy name, it's usually a Muslim name, codified. And then they'll have their lodge is named after either a Moorish leader or a Moorish woman, etc. And the lodge is always mother because it's the matriarchy, while in the public pretending they don't know that these people are Moors. They're clandestine, particularly the ones that claim to be black. After getting that knowledge and coming out of them lodges with that knowledge and still claim to be black, they're clandestine. First lesson they get is with Ruth the Moabitess. And Ruth the Moabitess was Yeshua's, who you call Jesus' great-great-grandmother. She was Moabite, he was Moabite, and so was you. You go in there and get that knowledge and come out claiming to be black after getting that supreme knowledge, you clandestine. That's why the Europeans refer to so-called black nations as clandestine. They think it's prejudice. No, because you get that knowledge and then still playing black when that knowledge is supposed to pull you out of darkness into light. You understand? And then you start talking that race, which means they don't get it. They still hoodwinked. You get the point? However, I'm not knocking them. They do have some knowledge, you understand? But it ain't given to them straight paper. You know, we're just talking to you 100. Giving it to you straight paper. Now, deal with this. We want to solve problems. We don't block or reject other information. We try to focus on that information that is solutionary. Knowing that the people are behind the 8 ball, which means they lack a lot of vital information. So while we're on a learning curve, they're accelerating their theft of your birthright. This is why certain things, again, like I say, I'll redundantly focus in certain areas. The areas I like to focus on is any area that really represents a nail in the coffin of the vampire, although there's other information. Because we have limited time, I'm more interested in doing those things that are effective as opposed to playing it safe and saying interesting things that keep you busy but don't fix a damn thing at the moment. Don't mean toss it. You know, meaning that if the window's broke, I'm not going to talk about vacuuming the floor, though we need to vacuum the floor. I'm going to be going to get plywood or glass or something and some putty and stuff and be working on that window. Whether I complete it or not, that's the point, is I'm going to be working where the air's coming in. If you're cold, I'm going to be working on a blanket, not, your shoes, because polishing your shoes. If you kind of understand where I'm coming from. But I'm not saying that that's not important. So when I approach this information, I will stick in areas that deal with putting the nail in the coffin of the vampires. It needs a lot of nails. And all I'm saying is, if people who really love the people really wanted to start solving some of our problems, economic and political, they will get in the uncomfortable areas that a lot of people don't want to get into because they don't want to rock the boat, and just tell the truth what it is. Because until the people start facing the truth and reality and start dumping some things that have really cluttered their lives and have been wasting their time, by the time they finally wake up, Rome will have gotten rid of them and got them out of the way because they don't understand he's feeding on them. So you have limited time to really wake up, as you might say. Even in a person who's not awake don't recognize it because they don't know that they don't know. If you get the point. And then some people who know, who are lax with this information, may not be clear that the European has an agenda to eliminate these people. Physically. Like for real. Meanwhile, robbing all of their estate. So when you look at this thing, this is why you don't see me, I don't condemn, that's why you don't see me getting into a lot of other subject matter of information that's very, very interesting. Meaning that if it doesn't stop the IRS from taking somebody's stuff, or some fake foreign member of the barristery of Fleet Street, England, of the Crown, too, who call themselves bankers and lawyers, that hurt or interfere or put a bridge between them taking somebody's house. If it don't deal with stuff like that, I don't deal with it. Not because I'm not interested in it. Because before you can liberate these people in other areas of spirituality, etc., they've got to have a piece of bread in their stomach. A beggar people cannot develop the high spirituality in themselves. A woman in pain cannot really care for her family or even be preoccupied building a relationship. It creates stress, which creates sickness. Then meanwhile, I'm saying Rome's giving them all kinds of poisons in the name of medicine and tampering with the food. Then they give them dogma in the name of religion so they don't know their own bodies. And so we're out of harmony, which causes dis-ease. So these things are related. So a lot of things that I deal with redundantly is for that purpose. Meaning not that I can't deal with other stuff. But sometimes people think that I'm not dealing with other subject matters. That I could. But it's not where I'm at. I like to deal with things that work. I like to deal with pins that have some sharpness to it, to bust them balloons of the priesthood, because there's a lot of them. And if you don't start busting them balloons by the time you get around to deciding to do it, they then took somebody else out. You know, and the people not knowing don't suspect that Reverend Pigfoot is a helper of the Pope of Rome because they think he's helping Jesus. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And they believe in him. You know, meanwhile, he has no conscience whatsoever, taking millions of notes from the widow that should be going to her family and her children. $60 million planes and stuff like this to take the word when they know that these people don't even know basic etymology. But they always talk about the word of God. They don't know what the word means and they don't know what God means. They think they do. And that's not dismissing people who use these terms loosely because we're trained. However, with basic education, they will discover themselves that they don't know what they're talking about. Doesn't mean reject it. It means know what you're talking about. You know, then you can accept it or reject it, but know what you're talking about. So I'm going to finish and go through a synopsis with the Klan, reminding you that their job is the grand protectors of the Christian creed. And so many of our people, go ahead, Tammy. Can you get the mic because we want this. Can somebody run this up there? Thank you. Islam.
I just wanted to go back over the notes. You indicated that the KKK is the second largest secret society.
Is one of two.
One of two, okay.
Of the secret organizations of, this is very important,
Okay.
secret organizations of Christendom.
Okay.
Christendom is the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, which includes all Catholic churches and their protesting daughters who are known worldwide as Protestant, who think that they're separate. Meaning, most of the people in the congregations of the Protestant orders think that they're separate from the Catholic Church. That is a design deception. And the rulers and the leaders know it, but the congregants don't know it. Again, this is why you see quickly, without going through a whole bunch of stuff, that it doesn't take much to educate people. You just simply got to tell them the truth. And truth need not be told in a multitude of words. You've got to be able to box. You know, somebody could be boxing, right? If somebody keep jabbing you in your eye and stuff like that, it's a good idea to do this. You know, like keep your hands up, protect yourself at all times, you know, kind of stuff. And it's the same thing, but most people, by not really being educated in things that they themselves claim by accepting belief systems, don't know the rules to the very claims that they themselves are making. That's what blind faith to the destruction of humanity that has done to this planet. People are claiming to be Muslims, Jews, Confucius, Christians, and when you test them on their own doctrine, 99% of them fail. And we're not talking about whether they're good or bad people. We're not judging them based on what they claim. They have a right to. The problem that they have is they don't know the swell they're talking about. And I just wanted to show you that to demonstrate in short order how much people who claim to be Christians don't know about Christianity. And show you it's not difficult to show you. But it gave you tools. It gave you tools to work with. And the deal of it is, it makes you know what you don't know. And it kills your idea or your naivety about what, when you thought you was getting it together. You had that spell. Including people that claim Islam and Judaism. It's in the culture. Do you understand? Meaning that you don't have to go to one of those circles to be influenced. It's inculcated into the culture. Even the Federal Reserve note that you have in your pocket, that you've been trained to think is money, has absolute connection to this. And most people look at these things as different subject matters. That's the problem. You have to, and you are encouraged to, start looking at things with multiple eyes and bringing them to one. That's that third eye there. You know, so you merge your smell, the electrical sight in the eye, the hearing, the taste, together, and they become one eye. That's what that eye of Horus represents, or what they call the eye of Allah. And sometimes referred to as the seven eyes of Allah. They're not just there to be there, they're there to give you a message to bring them into one. Then you see. And that is called the all-seeing eye. That's when man actually begins to, in the nature of the self, become one with Allah or one with the spiritual realm while still being in the physical. These are some of the things that the prophets really are trying to get across to people. But people have a tendency to get spooky and start worshiping the prophets rather than paying attention to what they're saying. When the prophets themselves are still on a learning curve, they're just on a higher level. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And then some of them are walk-ins. Some of them stayed or didn't come back for lessons, they came back to help. You know, but then the dark ones are here in droves. And this is what's wrong with the planet. You know what I mean? So we need purer spirits to counter the dark priesthood. And that's just bluntly truth. And I'm not saying that promoting any kind of belief system whatsoever. Myself, personally, I don't promote belief systems because I don't believe in belief systems. I believe in trying to know. I believe in finding truth. I believe in embracing truth. I believe in dumping whatever I feel today if I find the truth tomorrow.
Yes, I should.
Islam.
No, I'm disagreeing.
Hallelujah to you.
You know, and this is why, like, for instance, where people who really don't understand Great Seal, why you see the acronym Islam, I, self, law, M, master, I, self, law, addict, master, I, self, law, alchemy, master, I, self, law, astrology, master. I am, A-M, that I am. So Islam has creed areas around 78 of them. I, self, law, and master rises outside of that paradigm and takes truth where it is found. It is not based on what anyone claims. Label or not. This is why a lot of people do not understand Islam coming from the Moorish perspective. Do you understand? Because it seems to contradict some of the creed games played in Islam. Well, not really, but it contradicts dogma, no matter what its source. Do you understand? So if someone who claims to be a Christian, brings a truth, a man or woman dealing with the principles of Islam will accept that truth. Do you understand what I'm saying? If somebody comes to you who claims to be an atheist, but he comes with the truth, a man or woman who claims Islam will accept that truth. Do you understand? That's the distinction of where humanity needs to go to be liberated. You cannot get caught in the labeling of things and then try to fit that mold, because you will always be enslaved. Are we clear? And as soon as you find in general nature the disharmony of the lack of universality in a philosophy, look for the lie. And that's a tool that I've always used. I'm just suggesting that to you. You know, because the purpose is liberation. Not serving another man in the name of anything that they call religion, because the masses don't get religion anyway. So anyway, and so I'll read this through, and if some questions arise, final statements in here, write them down, because these will be points of research for you. And like I always tell people, don't accept what I'm saying, prove me wrong. Because people who deal with beliefs will immediately condemn, you know, because that's their training. But for people who really want to learn, prove me wrong. Then we can have a deep conversation. Then I'll show you how much more I know that I ain't telling. You know what I mean? Because we're limited. But you know what I mean?
Right.
We want to help each other. We want to aid each other. We want to be assistants to each other. We want the world to be a better place. We want the next generation to have something to be here for and not be so miserable and blaming the mystical devil, but beginning to recognize their problems come from that person who's been saying God, Jesus, Allah, who's been hiding on them platforms, who's really the demon and has never been charged. So if people suspect that that's what I've been leading to, they don't have to suspect it. I'm saying it. You know, they don't. So the Ku Klux Klan is one of the two largest of the secret organizations of Christendom that flourished in the southern territories of North America during the period of Reconstruction. The Ku Klux Klan was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee, and is noted for its sincere and unmoved dedication and honor to the Christian creed and to the Constitution of the Union of States. Tennessee entered the Union of States Society in the moon month of June 1, 1796 AD, equaling 1216 Morse calendar year, and takes the honor of the first home of the clanners. That's a general name they give themselves, clanners. The Ku Klux Klan order grew very rapidly in 1867 and 1868 AD, equaling 1282 and 1288 Morse calendar. The general organization of the Klan was perfected in May of the year 1867, at which time a constitution, quote unquote, was adopted. The second and modern society of the Ku Klux Klan was founded in 19 and 15 AD, equaling 1335 Morse calendar in Atlanta, Georgia. Pay attention to these locations because that has a lot to do with the politics today.
That was going to be what I was going to
Yes. You'll be surprised once you know history how much is related and understand why secret societies exist, for some things that you think you understand in the politics or don't understand in the political realm now, they're operating on multiple layers. They do not deal in vacuum. Keep that in mind. Anyone who rules deals with the past, the present, and the future in the center, in presence, and are cognizant of it. This is a secret power of the priesthood and all people in power. I'm sharing that with you, and my son, Dr. Hannibal, who's really a magi, and I'm appreciative that he's my son, because actually, he's my ancient father, truthfully. And he just come back to share and help. Many of the areas where he goes into the ancient Lemurian and Mauryan and Nanda Gupta dynasty Gnostic wisdoms and the tablets of the ancient ones is to bring you abreast so you can see through the priesthood. See, because that you can protect, put it this way, you can learn some systems of protection, but there's also systems that are in you that have to be awakened. And that once certain things are said to you, even though you're not aware of it immediately, a priest can, because it's almost like hitting switches and turning on lights. They will see light that you don't see. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when you have some light, you can go amongst the dark priesthood and say absolutely nothing. They'll recognize when you walk in that room. Do you understand what I'm saying? And this is why we're trying to bring you to another level of how to look at things. And thankfully, and thank Dr. My son, so I'm not boasting because he's my son. Because he's my son, my buddy, because we kind of grew up together a little bit. And because a lot of times when people really want to share, they get burnt by people who don't really understand this, and they'll often go into a shell. But I thank you for coming back out to aid humanity. So I just want you to know that. Because probably, I'm your father, I'm your father's son, I'm your son's father, type thing. You won't hear me say that because I don't deal with egos, which you already know that. But I'm just telling you because it's appreciated and needed. Because you know and I know that most people that have that knowledge will not share it. And I'm grateful and honored, that the divine let me have you. I'm appreciating that.
There you go.
Now, so the KKK order grew very rapidly, 1868. Keep that date in mind. We're going to hit on it later. This is also conversion day, conversion time of the corporate United States Corporation Company registered in France to convert your estate to them. So you got to look at all of this together. None of this is accidental. Are we clear?
I heard you mention before that they're also registered in Puerto Rico. Is that true?
Yes, it's in Puerto Rico now. But it was in France, then Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. And bankrupted about 4 times. And they created new shells and new shells and new shells. So the second and modern society of the Ku Klux Klan was 1915, right? Atlanta, Georgia. And the major aim of the Ku Klux Klan order is the arbitrary regulation of life. Are we clear? Arbitrary regulation of life. They're claiming the authority to control life. In other words, they've declared themselves God. Are we clear? By quote-unquote white Christian Protestants. 1868. Keep that in mind. White Christian Protestants. And this is when they start taking on the term white, which later becomes a party by representation in Philadelphia to Horace Greeley, the New York newspaper tycoon, to take on the noble title of the Moors. It's not a complexion, it means sovereign of the land. So when you look at the questionnaire that Drew Ali presented to you concerning white, why they take on the title white, understand that when you call him white man, you just call him sovereign and ruler of the land. You just cast a spell, but you also convert your birthright to him. You just sanction him under trust law to rule over your estate. This is why so-called leader guys who know these degrees are not excused by continuing to call that European white man and call him American and then calling you black. That makes you subjugant and dead in law. And that's true. Another subject matter, but that's where that has its origin. And this is why generations ago, and a lot of the younger brothers, y'all could hear about it, but y'all young enough not to be grounded in understanding why a few generations back, if you called us black, you had a fight. They were setting you up to steal your estate. Had nothing to do with complexion. Had to do with status. Everything to do with status. Are we clear? Just want to remind you. Now, so your political parties that you be thinking is your government are 2 branches of the Klan broke off from the Whittemore Party. And this is Europeans wearing wigs pretending to be Moors. And in England, they do that in jurisprudence even to this day. They put on the curly wig and then judge the world. In other words, they've upset the rulers. You're the real nobles. Are we clear? So you need to know they are the grand protectors of the creed of Constantine. That's why they hide behind the code word Jesus. So you trust them. Are we clear? When actually in code, they lynch justice. This is why Drew gave you in your questionnaire, Jesus means justice. He's giving you the sociological application. Are we clear? But he's also giving you history. And then he says, the Europeans are living off your virtues. See, so you can't look at that information just on the surface. You've got to have a background in history and jurisprudence to really understand that he hit you with a nuclear power book in that little teeny book. That's why so many people, the world got shook when Drew Ali came on the scene. Because high priests recognized what he did. People who can't appreciate it, oh, this little book, oh, it's interesting. Oh, yeah, all right. They have no idea how powerful it is. But that's another lesson. But y'all been getting them too. Now, a few of the other Christian secret orders. These are a few of the other secret. Two, the Knights of the White Camellia. That's Camillia. 3, the Society of the White Rose. for the White League. There's more in my other text, which, Tam, there's more, but these were all synopses. Just to get people awake some, to get them started without cluttering them. Because people have a short attention span. That's another reason why I kept the book simple. By training, they have a short attention span. Clanners. Clanner is the designation used to identify a member of either one of the secret societies. The Ku Klux Klan, that's K-U, K-L-U-X, K-L-A-N, Ku Klux Klan, also known as Kaikos, is derived from the Greek word kaiklos, which means a circle. Are we clear? Also, the Germanic word church means circle. Now you see why they have that cross that they be burning? The circle for the circle of the Greeks who stole the legacy from the ancient Hykuptans and renamed Hykupta Egypt. That ain't Egypt, that's Hykupta. They stealing your birthright. And it goes for millennia, as long as they've been on the earth. Are we clear? So most people who really don't know history and law don't make that connection. They be looking at different things that are taking place now when the people that are doing things for you, they're in a time warp and stepping forward and back. And they're cognate. That's what gives them power over you. They're not smarter than you. They know the way. They just use it for darkness. Are we clear? And many of those among us who know it are punks and won't tell because they know Rome will cut your throat. But if they love Allah, Jesus, the divine so much, they wouldn't be worrying about their lives because they knew their mother would give them another body. And that man don't die. All they can do is slow you down. So you can come back at will. Duh. And some sell out for a few pieces of slugs. They so daggone corrupt, they don't even give them slugs no more, no silver. They don't even know the energy of the moon is silver, the alchemy of the moon. And actually, the silver is one of your purifiers. You can have a silver coin in your pocket, and it actually kills bacteria. Did you know that, y'all? Did you know that? That bacteria can't live on silver? You know, like, let me say this. A neighbor at the main house, and I think now my son was young then. My neighbor named Butch had a car across the street from me at the main house, at 800. His car wouldn't start. And I went over and I was helping him with his car, and I was telling him to wait and start the car. Anyway, I was pouring gas in his carburetor. And he started the car early, and the gasoline splashed. Remember? Yes, remember that? Yes, on my arm. It was so hot, I had to hold my arm away from me, and it was burning my hair, and I was throwing dirt on it, and my skin was pouring off like it was wax on my arm, right? Yeah. Yes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's when we was going to the temple, I remember that.
Yes, and it was real hot, real hot, and so I got his car started. I still got his car started. Anyway, he was all upset because I was still working on the car, dripping. Yeah, I was still working on the car. All my arm was bare, right? And got the car started. I went in the house and I ran cold water on it, and then I put ice on it. Now, so I went to a pharmacist. I went to the hospital, then went to the pharmacist and got Silverdyne. Silverdyne is a salve. It has silver in it, right? They wanted to keep me. Don't get anything there. You know what I mean? But anyway, yes. So you all see my arm? Nothing.
He went to the temple that he
Nothing. No scars. When I was doing my brother's deck, remember? When I was doing the deck around the pool, cut my finger off, accidentally caught my glove, cut my finger off. It grew back. Just want you to know that. You don't see no scars there. And there ain't no burn scars there. Islam.
Islam. The last name of the product is called, the first name is Silver, the last name is D-I-M-E or D-I-E? Silver dye.
Silver dye. It's a salve, and it has refined.
Is it D-O-M-E or
Silver dye.
D-I-N-E?
D-I-N-E. And it has silver, and actually that's old medicine. You know, the honesty, you know, show the Europeans. And the honesty is what you call equal confederation. The Constitution for the United States has its origin. You know, come from you. It came from your own forefathers. And we ain't Indians either.
It's D-E-N-E.
You know, so they claim, you know, it's like we ain't Negroes, we ain't blacks, we ain't colored, we ain't Indians. You know, all that is to disconnect you from your history. That's another reason for the brand system. Also, it takes you off the platform of law, and therefore you can't use the Constitution and treaty as a defense because you're not a party to it. This is where a lot of Europeans who have been trying to get the republic back, and they've started a lot of different sovereignty groups, because now they got frustrated that the middle class is being thrown under the bus, and they perfect the different systems that they've set up to these apples, political apples. If you bite this apple and apply for this under the financial statement, give us all the information, we'll give you control of the QSIC number on the back of that birth certificate, and don't need no social security and stuff. And if you authenticate this birth certificate, we'll let you be holder in due course and executor over this Sister QB trust. And then you bite it, and then you're on it. You know, but this deal. A lot of Europeans in different study groups, because they know the history more, you know, because our people can sleep, but they know what they did. You're not a party to it. See, when they agree to be white people, they gave up their birthrights to them.
Thank you. Thank you.
See, it's come back to bite them.
Real head.
Do you understand? Because that constitution come from Moors and some European deists who were not Christian. They were deists. You know what deists are? The Europeans will call them atheists. Deists are those who study the ancient Asiatic, Lemurian, Hikukta culture. Deity, that's a DJH, is the proper name for the planet Mercury, which is a communication center in this particular solar system, because all of us came from this planet.
Right.
This thing is bigger than you think it is. And from the communication center with the other planets, this is why the other planets are often called deities, but yet there's only one deity, Mercury. Now, isn't that simple? It's not complex, is it? Is it? But yet, to the people, they're all gods. That's where you get deities from. They're planets. And they're all up in the sky. That's why everybody looking in the heavens looking for the gods. Their concepts are wrong. And they're just dealing with the different governors from the different planets or the rulers. And so this is where you get the people, and so those who came from the heavens, they call those who come down from the heavens. And they sort of say Anunnaki, which means those who come down. They held back, they've kind of out to lunch. But in general, it's, just like when Islam would say, Allah is the God of all the worlds. Well, you gotta understand Allah. Allah is the gateway of woman herself. But it's not a particular one. It is the principle of the feminine. The mother gate. It's true. So again, this alchemy thing and the almanac thing, but then you had what you call power rulers, some that were more powerful than others, who were competing. This is where you get the know God before me type thing. Do you understand? I'm just telling you those things because if you really understand those things, you'll get out of the mysteries of the books. It'll stop being mysterious to you. And you'll stop, you'll understand our idea of worshiping the gods is not exactly what most people think it is. But also why it always ends up being an abstract. And they're always waiting for them to come again. Because they always came in cycles. It's never been that they have not come here. And it's never been that they have not presently been here. It's not always that you're conscious of it. Because some of them look just like you and me. And some of them don't. Usually the ones that don't hide themselves or veil themselves. But let's not get into that. But the deal of it is, these are known facts. The other deal that you must recognize is there was no eat your brains mixing with eggs. They were done a long time ago. So don't let the dark priesthood scare you and keep you in a bunch of fears. You're developing. You're being prepared for other things. Some are here on a learning curve. Plus, the earth is a storehouse. It's a storehouse. It's a school. In some areas, it's a prison. Not the whole planet. So let's get over all of the mystery stuff how people look at this thing. And to inform you, hell that's been taught in the priesthood was really the chambers beneath the great circle of the church that the popes would throw people who didn't pay off the bishopric. That's hell. You understand? This is why people have this idea of being under the ground, that hell's in the ground. They were in prisons underneath the church. That's where they took all the babies' bodies that they sacrificed, where the babies that the nuns had that wasn't giving nobody none. Down there. Really, that's hell. And that's true. And for those of you who doubt it, go in your law books and look up the word hell in your Black's Law Dictionary, and you'll see it's beneath the extra church chamber. That they do when they steal on people's estate. When they foreclose on people, they have to take them to chancery for it. And chancery is what? Fleet Street, England, you got the circle round, and then you got the chancery that make up the crown on Fleet Street, which is really the lawyers and the bankers that are screwing you and the world. And the IRS is the collection arm for the Jesuits. And none of it is legitimate government. None of it. None of it is constitutional. None of it. Nor are the people who are running them. They're all criminals and thieves and members of the Round and the Chancery. And of the Kaikos and Ku Klux Klan in one of your orders. That's why the secret orders wear the Moorish fez, because they have conquered you. Not because they honor it in the concept of it belonging to them. It is a crown, they have stolen your crown. This is why, like the movie they made, and this is probably why they made it in Philadelphia, with Eddie Murphy, Trading Places. And the theme of the movie was stock. And in a code, they're telling you the truth. Well, anyway, I ain't gonna burden you with that. I'll finish the Klan thing here. Now, so the founders of the Ku Klux Klan were clearly using high-cultured cosmological science, cosmology, in its structure or structural constitution. This secret order was not founded by ignorant men, therefore should not be viewed or dismissed as merely an outlaw organization or unreasonable people going wild with hate and unconstitutional violence. Doesn't mean that some of the Klanners don't do that, but don't misjudge the Ku Klux Klan for the sake of the dirty doers. Are we clear? This would be a very inaccurate assessment. Klanners have traditionally honored their Union of States Constitution with more orthodox respect than others who have criticized the Klan. Most critics have never read the United States Constitution. It's true. General Nathan Bedford Forrest. Nathan Bedford Forrest. The Union of States Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest was the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. The KKK order was effective in frightening the Negro, quote unquote, as connotated, out of his unnatural alliance with the Union leagues. So that gives you a point of reference to do some research, doesn't it? So we're looking at actual political motive, although there are other motives. Are we clear? So you're not making assumptions. It gives you a point of reference where you can do some research and find some things out about real history, all right? But was also used as a cloak for lawlessness. Are we clear? So the Klan was used as a cloak or cover for the U.S. corporation operatives to do lawless deeds and pretend that they had no connection. It's called false flags and red flags. Are we clear? There's very things that you see them doing around the world with all these false flags, including dropping them buildings in New York and pretending some Muslim did it, is a Ku Klux Klan activity. They did it. Are we clear? No Muslim with no box knife in the cave did it. Bin Laden had nothing to do with it whatsoever.
Like Oklahoma City?
Same thing. Oh, let's talk about Oklahoma City. Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is another thing that they don't tell you. The Asiatics of Tulsa, Oklahoma had the wealthiest bank in North America. It was a bank robbery under the Spanish Inquisition that never ended. So they talk about, the horror of the United States governing body, bombing, literally, them. They looted it first. And they murdered the people, and they used bulldozers and fed them to the pigs. They fed their bodies to the pigs. And they looted the banks, and they looted all the wealth. This is under the Spanish Inquisition, i.e., U.S. military Klanners under the Democratic Party. The same Democratic Party that our people keep voting for call themselves Democrats. Just call themselves Christians. Don't know it's connected. Politicians, scholars, Masons, and Klanners know that. The average person in the street doesn't know it. This is what makes this stuff so dangerous. Because our people are aiding in their own enslavement while marching all over the place, making fools of themselves, thinking that they're going to get sympathy. Well, somebody got to tell the truth.
Say it loud. Keep in the back again.
Islam.
Islam.
What was the situation with, I think it was a gentleman named Timothy McVeigh, who tried to blow up the
He was a pawn, he was a pawn, he was a pawn. What was happening with that building out there is that many derivatives, many of the dead allonges attached to dead mortgages and stuff like that, and much of the paperwork and the records related to different organizations and foundations of people you hear about today were in that building. Go, Doc, give her the mic. Go ahead. All right. Okay, she was doing the real hand raising.
No, I was like, ooh, I got also, what was in that building, what the things that we watched, the whistleblower shared that all of the Gulf War syndrome. You remember all the veterans that went to the Gulf War and came back.
The papers format.
They were,
chemicals.
yeah. So that particular that was in there because there normally takes, I don't know how long it takes to make sure that a vaccination gave these servicemen and women who were going to the Gulf War, this vaccination that was not proven or tested. So when they get over there, they didn't get sick from being there. They got sick from what they were vaccinated with. Not only did they get sick, but when they came home,
they were making their wives sick.
Their wives became sick. The babies had sicknesses and deformities. So all of the records
were there
in the Morrow building,
including suits that were perfected.
Right. So they were they were supposed to get these records because somebody in the Senate or somebody had brought up a congressional, some kind of big hearing, and they needed that. So on top of that, a lot of the Clinton stuff, the issues, were in that building, that they were some cases. So it was
the so-called mortgage bubble.
Yeah. So they like you said, he was a patsy. He was recruited by one of his superiors who had been in the military. He did not want to do it. He did not want to do it. But what they do, they said that when these men go in, they profile them. They know what kind their psychological, they give them certain injections, super soldier, crazy. They give him all kinds of things. Yeah. And he had no choice but to go along with this thing. But they were really trying they didn't want to have to pay all these people for all these years for all what they had done with these vaccinations, the Gulf War syndrome. Like made us think it was coming from being in the Gulf when it was really from the vaccinations.
Including Agent Orange.
Right, the stuff that the government had imposed on their own people. And it's far reached. They don't even know how many generations that this sickness is.
And it's still affecting people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, again, and many of you know, and you already know, Elijah, some of our friends who died from Agent Orange. Yeah. And these were a lot of perfected suits. And the so-called mortgage bubble that took place in 08, all of that stuff. Papers were there. So you had suits that were being perfected. And the fact out, and this is what it would show, not just that, it would become realized by the people, because people keep on saying the U.S. government did to their own people. That concept is kind of wrong, because they are not your government. They are foreign Europeans imposturing as government for decades, and these people are pawns to continue the European Spanish Inquisition hegemony operations for birthright theft and to drain the economics of the Amaracan people. That's the truth. Go ahead, son.
Yeah, you graced out this one?
I know.
Yes.
You Grace, I wanted to add in about the mortgage. If you all recall back in 2005, the Christina thing, all right, remember our cousin Mike Bey, God rest his soul. He worked for a mortgage company in Jersey, PHH. And when that hit the Louisiana area, his company, he was the cat that did the IT stuff. So he was working late. He seen them on a shredding party. It was one night. They were shredding the mortgages and stuff. Now I was listening to the radio. I was listening to Wendy Williams at that time. What happened? Glad you asked. One of the persons that was from Louisiana called in and said, hey, I just want to let you know you're not on the air here. And she said, what's going on? And she said, for one, she was one of the people that actually had her stuff, you know, the mortgage papers had it in plastic and all, what have you. Called the mortgage company, they try to run around in circles and what have you. Talking about they didn't have a mortgage. Long story short, I just want to add to the mortgage thing. This company was shredding the people's mortgages. And they weren't intending on paying them. And that's what kind of got out, but they kind of kept it quiet. But that's what was happening. And that's why a lot of these people that lived in the Louisiana area, they didn't get their houses fixed, they didn't get their money. Some of them were still considered refugees. Some of them came as close up here where we at. We're from Jersey. So they was right across the bridge. No, matter of fact, a couple came to Jersey, and some was up in Philadelphia. But yeah, that's what that mortgage company in New Jersey, right in Sherryville area, he said they were shredding the mortgages. They were.
Now the reason, I'm gonna tell you why. Now I'm aware of a couple of European lawyers, one woman, one man in particular, and I think you might remember this, Dr. Hannibal, that were suing for the restoration of their promissory note, which is the foundation. And then a lot of conscious Moors were doing the same thing. Because the deal of it is that the people have long ago since satisfied the mortgage. And they have these people still transferring finance under the deed of trust to these law firms and etc. When the deal of it is the promissory note satisfied it from the beginning and they owed nothing, which is the same with most people. Now, so some Europeans, usually when Asiatics do it, they suppress or do a whole bunch of stuff. Now, this was opening up a can of worms. So they shredded the mortgages because the mortgages did not have attached thereto the promissory notes, which should have never been separated, including the allonges, which showed that they were selling them around the world over and over again, and all your derivatives are based on that. So they were shedding the evidence. So people need to understand process too, not just that they were doing, they need to know why. And this is again why a lot of people say some Moors who kind of don't like us for sharing the information that we're sharing, and they call themselves grand chiefs and sheikhs of the Moorish Science Temples of America, knew this too, and know that a lot of Moors have been injured by that process when they were supposed to be outside of that venue, and their stuff was supposed to be in trust under the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and they didn't do it, which is again why a lot of them don't like me, because to them I talk too much. Right? Because in due time, when people start figuring this out, the people themselves will recognize that you got traitors on our side too. Right. But as long as they don't have reference point, we're not just talking, cover. When you start giving details where people can start doing research, they'll start getting to a point of knowing how to think logistically and think critically, and they will figure things out themselves. Then we don't have to tell them anything. Now these people will be in the wind with their tails in the wind, And they know that's coming. So while people are ignorant, they'll troll people like us. You know, because we're so few who are willing to put our necks on the line for the people. And so it looks like we're out to lunch, so we're so contrary to the positions that they hold. And then we, all branches, seem like we should be saying the same thing. You know, like we supposed to be over here saying hallelujah to you too. You know, we ain't here saying hallelujah to you. We'll be talking science, of life, of politics, of economics, of solutions, of remedy, and giving detailed knowledge that these people haven't been holding back. And all they're saying, praise the Lord, we love no Lee. You know, give me $5, and they just doing reverse church, and they know it. Now, I'm not knocking them, I'm just saying that's the truth. So when you all see them trolling, that's why. Because a lot of things that you're being told, they should have told you decades ago. And these Moorish Americans should not be suffering at the hands of these European colonists who are not their government. Is the Democratic Party. And the others in the Republican Party they're called rhinos. They're really Democrats in their other side of their party to make you think that you have a choice when you really don't. Are we clear? That's why no operations ever favor the people. Never. Promises are always made, none are kept. Because they're not your government. They are not constitutional, none of them. And this is also why, bluntly, they're mad at Trump because he's not following the party line. Trump has been following the Republican order of government, whether he's compromised or not, I'm not arguing. I'm not even defending Donald J. Trump. It's just that I understand government, and I know the history. And I also know that Trump is a nice temper. Now, one way or another, I'm not defending him. But the things that Trump is doing between the rhetoric, which many of the public don't get, he's calling out the roaches. He will say things that really, if you really understand the politics, he don't mean. He's making people take positions and then trapping them later. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, people who don't really understand the history, mad at Trump, and you just say anything come out of his mouth. Well, if you really understood, he's playing an organized body of criminals. Now, I ain't defending him. I'm just telling you what it is. And much of what he's doing represents restoration of the Republican platform of government as set forth in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution for the United States, with heavy opposition. You know, so he's putting his neck on the line just like, you know, in a way that Lincoln did, and Kennedy. And although people may not see them as relative, if you look at the politics and look past the rhetoric, you can see it. Now, whether or not he's compromised, much of what he said so far puts him and his family in danger. So that would be more inspiration for him, even if he was compromised, to go ahead and carry it through. Because you know, how you say, when you get at the end of the diving board, and then you decide to turn around and the crowd is pushing, because they want to dive too. Yeah. You know, you doing this type of thing. You may as well go ahead and make a small dive, because he gonna push you anyway. But and this is where I see Donald Trump. We'll get into that later. But the deal of this is for people to understand, and this is with all due respect to anyone that's operating in those political platforms at North America that appear to have any honor. None of them are legitimate governmental operators. They're all members of the Roman Curia under the Jesuit order and the Circle Church on Fleet Street in England of the Chancery. Fact. There was no lawful president nor an administration of government operating at North America since Abraham Lincoln administration. Period. So get over it. And the other thing that you want to stop doing is calling them your government, any of them. Federal, state, or municipal. Not opinion, fact. And for those who are listening who don't understand what I'm saying at this moment, go research the Organic Act of Congress, February, it's around the 21st in that area, 1871. And then understand the fundamental principles of constitutional government. And you will learn a lot. And you'll learn why certain things that I say what I say. And those who, among Moors who are conscious, they have Moors who are unconscious, no Moors who are conscious, and persons who claim to love Noble Drawley, who are angry at Tajik for talking constitutional principles, know this too. And they also know that once you all do research for yourself, it won't be what Taji says, it will be what you know. Then the light will be on them like a neon sign, and you'll recognize that many people who've been saying they love Noble Drawley were actually put in there by J. Edgar Hoover and their COINTELPRO. But the people don't know because they don't have the knowledge by which to measure spies and infiltrators, because they don't know the law. Do you understand? And so I'm not a constitutional fold of government, which is their responsibility to do. I just want to throw that in there. And who's really paying them off? Planners. One of these secret orders is paying them off. And half of them are Masons too. Go ahead.
I wanted to add and backtrack a little bit when Father was talking about the temple, so y'all can understand. Y'all basically understand the way the Catholic Church is set up. The priests, all their property, whatever, they exercise the tax exemption status. So what Father is saying, the individuals in the temple, what you were supposed to do when you become nationalized, you remember your title is brother or sister. So that's your signature. Short for brother is BRO, period. For the sister is SIS. You're considered like a priest. So when Father says when you get nationalized and those Moors are not doing your job there, you're supposed to operate almost like you see the Catholic Church in them.
Ecclesiastical principle.
Yeah, and you're then, when you purchase your house, your car, everything else, you're supposed to have your tax exempt stuff status.
It is not even tax exempt for the average. That's distinguished from tax exempt.
Right.
Tax exempt is an application to the Jesuit order of the IRS under a submission of converted rights into privileges under license condition. There is no condition in the birthright. They have no purview, and thus the Aboriginal people are not taxed. So your position is non-obligatory, not taxed. I just want to make that clear because a lot of people don't say that phrase.
Is the point that I want to say.
And not just because it does, but the status, and this is what everyone would need to know. That right already existed. Noble Drawley came to remind you what you forgot. And this is what people need to understand. They're not giving you anything. He brought back to you what was taken from you, including your consciousness. And this is another misrepresentation of the Moorish Science Temple of America, where people try to act like it's giving you something. It's making you aware of what already exists before you were born, and people in organized government and in organized situations were blocking from you. And then when you find out they be trying to own it and trying to control your life and trying to rule over you unjustly, this is where we talk about be careful more. Some of your brothers and sisters wearing turbans and feathers will be trying to put you back into slavery, which means they're not telling you the truth about birthright. Birthright is a divine position that already exists by divine order. Government has no purview in it whatsoever. There is no discussion about it. There is nothing that they can say about it. It is not just a wall, and it's not just a brick wall, that there's an avenue of planets between it. They have nothing to do but to protect you in that right. which means government only exists at all, to preserve the birthrights of men that already exist. Outside of that, government has absolutely no purpose, and it has no rights to give because they don't belong to them. Are we clear? This is why they do not teach civics. Now, what has happened is organizations are patterned after fundamental governmental principles. They use different names, and what they've been doing is using organizations to steal your birthright. And so when you look at people in a position of authority, always look at them as public servants, not your master. And what they've done is flip that on you. This is birthright theft. Are we clear? So be clear on that distinction and look at all structures of government that way. Are we clear? From the top to the bottom. That way you understand the difference between unalienable rights and privileges. They're two different positions. Anywhere where there's a license, there's fraud. If a license exists, they're robbing you. If a license exists, they're robbing you. Are we clear? Islam says.
Islam, how do we, you mentioned not tax or
Not tax.
not tax obligational.
Non-obligatory.
Non-obligatory.
Distinguished from tax exempt.
Okay, how do we?
That would be non-obligatory, which means the obligation of tax didn't exist with you. There's no relationship. There's no foundation for it. There's no law for it. Are we clear? Not tax, which means it doesn't apply to you. It's not to be discussed. It doesn't apply to you. Tax exempt is a condition where the tax burden applies, and under certain conditions you make application by which it is set aside or discharged. Are we clear? Which means you're subordinate to that entity or sovereign. There's a difference. Now, and this is why it's important, and why people who are not honorable about this Moorish movement will try to get you attached to the U.S. corporation instead of telling you that you're a citizen of USA, Unity, Salvation, Allah, and then telling you that you're a party to this U.S. corporation and subject to them and submit to them. That's why they won't teach you about the Act of Congress, 1871. See, once you understand these things, you can make discernment. See, a lot of things we bring to you is so that you, on your own right, can make intelligent discernment, because we're giving you knowledge, not belief. Are we clear? We want you to be able, meaning like this. Like, say, for instance, if I'm selling you a product, i.e. suntan lotion, right? So that means it comes from me, and you're putting it on your skin, right? And so I make the conditions on how it's applied, though you can apply it. I can charge you however I want to, blah, blah, blah. Restrict you from it, etc., right? However, if you don't use it and you're just dealing with your skin, what right do I have in your skin? Your skin is your divine right. I have no right to intrude on it. But if I'm selling you suntan lotion, I can control that. That's the same thing between unalienable rights, or what is known as birth rights, and privileges, which is something that somebody legislates. And they become God over it. This is why the Khazarian of the dark priesthood Rothschild said, give me the power to print or to power over the money of a nation, and I don't care who makes their laws. That's part of the clan order of Caicos under the Spanish Inquisition operations. And this is what you're suffering from now. Are we clear? Led by the Ku Klux Klan party called the Democratic Party, set up by in 1868. With the rest of the stuff, even the conversion of your state. Now go ahead. I I just want to get that because I want to get that for people who are listening who may not be clear on this.
So how do we hold them accountable for the not tax or non-obligatory? Like, if we're
How can I say it simple?
right,
By being yourself. Now you got to know who the self is. Then you got to know your position. You got to know your relationship to other men. So how do you do? You step up to the constitutional fold of government. So that means you've got to understand what constitutions are, why they exist, what is there, how does it relate in history, how does politics form around it, what is real or de jure to it, and what's de facto to it. It is as simple as that. Now, on the surface, you probably know because you've been coming here to the House of Reawakening Minds. And others, around the country, and some people outside of this country who've been studying, our work of the roundtable for years understand this. For some people who may be new to this information, they have to be made clear that what we're telling you has nothing to do with belief systems. It has to do with that which is obligatory to all the people, and that affects all the people. What your beliefs are, set aside. But particularly for the redemption of people of Asiatic Moorish origin who have been under European colonial abusage for generations. They're the main target, but it is for all humanity. Are we clear? See, so once you understand, like as an example, they'll veil it like in the Constitution by saying Indians not taxed. But the symbol of the Indian or the indigenous people is you. But guys, under a refined argument that gives them leeway because you're really not Indians. You see the whole point? Are we clear? But then when you go into the treaties, they'll have Moorish treaties and Indian all in the same category. Do you understand? See, but if you don't know yourself, it doesn't dawn on you that you can't enforce the Constitution if you're not a party to it. So if you agree to be Negro, Black, or colored, you're off the platform. This is why our people, with all the treaty doesn't apply to them. Not because their forefathers weren't a party to it, it's because they claim to be somebody that they're not, and are practicing those names and principles that delude to slavery. Then suffering slavery and want to march all over the place making fools of themselves. And the leaders are doing it to them knowing better. If you kind of understand the nature of what I'm talking about, you kind of understand the nature of why some people was upset for Malcolm for finding this information out and then murdering him. And then you be thinking it's something else that you see in the movie, when it really is a lot of people around you, like you and me, they want him to tell because they couldn't buy him off. They knew that he was going to tell and find out that many of these leader guys themselves had nationality cards secretly.
Getting paid.
You understand what I'm saying? And it's true. The truth is ugly. But the deal is many people hide truths to protect the images of the legacies of different leader guys. And they assume because people don't talk about this, that this is, like some people like to say, a Moorish thing. No, this is a world thing. To know Moorish history is to know world history. To know European history is to know Moorish history. To know history of the human family on the planet is to know Moorish history. And that's not a biased statement, that's just simply fact. Because every nation on the earth will trace their illustrious history and growth into the Moors. And then that goes to the ancient Moabites, to the ancient Moabite Canaanite, to the ancient Lemurians, etc. We're all one. So the deal of it is, it's not a secret, it's just that it's not being told. You see, and this is also why our illustrious prophet Nabi said, go back to that state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers. That's an implication that the state of mind you're in right now, your concepts are wrong. But this is a starting point. Then you go back and you'll discover a lot of things. And of course, your concepts will change immediately. This is why people who don't study clash with people who study because they think they're doing something different when really they've graduated. or they've grown up. You know, it's sort of like you go to college and you go back to grade school and you want to debate with the kindergartners about calculus. You know, you don't do that. But you would want them to develop. And many people that get to degrees of the honor society, you know, or the round table or great seal, essentially represents, and while same flaws too, people still have the same flaws, that they're simply graduates. They're more PhD than they are believers, if you get the point. They're at different degrees, but you're dealing with people who graduated. And so a person who doesn't graduate, they think it's a clash. It's not a clash. You go to school to learn, to graduate. You don't go to school to stay stagnant. You don't go to school to stay in first grade all your life. And some people that go to different organizations don't get that. They want to meet an image, and they want to mold an image, but that image is like being on a treadmill. In any real organization that really is for human development, you graduate. You know, you warm the seat for a while, then somebody else is supposed to be in that seat. You know, you're not supposed to be still in the seat talking about hallelujah to you. Oh, I remember you. Yeah. You was that little girl. Oh, I see your grandchildren over here. What the swell? They supposed to be there. You're supposed to be out in the world doing things, producing. Not that you don't visit every once in a while, but grow up. You know, I mean, and people don't get that. And a lot of times people get into organizations, they think that they're supposed to be there forever. Because they're trained that way. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You know, and to demonstrate that, we had within all the temples what's called an adept chamber. Adept means expert. So if you're an expert, you're supposed to be still talking about how you make brownie cookies. Duh. You know, really, you understand where I'm coming from with that.
I got it.
Now, in constitutional law, and then when you're dealing with, I'll say the ordinance of 1787, which determines after the treaty with 1786, 1787, that's determining the operations of government at North America. Then 1788, 1789, the Constitution was adopted, and so that's the foundation of the formulation of the supreme law of the land. You don't need no daggone lawyers from the Bar Association. That Constitution is for the people to secure their rights from persons in government by limiting their authority to exercise protections and securing of your rights. They don't give you no rights. They're there to secure your rights. They've twisted this thing all around. This is where all your licenses come from. And this is where you're getting screwed. We're trying to get you back to the constitutional fold of government because the persons who claim to be government are actually your enemy. And they're organized, very well organized. And they've actually been attacking you. And then accusing others of doing it when actually it's them. This is no different than what the Europeans did in Boston with the Boston Tea Party, and the same thing they practiced at the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia. They darken their faces and do things and say that the Moors did it. They'll say the Indians did it. Or they'll say the Muslims did it. Because that's the political system. And they've been doing that, it's called what? False flags, and they've been doing that practice even up to this very day. Including dropping them buildings in New York and saying that Bin Laden did it. It had absolutely nothing to do with it. And then they went and murdered people all around the world to cover up their criminality. And those people were right here, from the presidential seat to the Senate, to the congressmen, to the governors, to all your secret clanners within structured government at North America, pretending to be government, and then taxing you to pay for weapons used against you. Now that's the truth. You know, that's the absolute truth. Go ahead, give her the mic.
Yes, ma'am. I want wanted to just talk about something briefly in pertaining to the Ku Klux Klan. I grew up in Georgia, born and raised in the territory of Georgia, Republic of Georgia. And I can recall as a young child the terror that the Ku Klux Klan would invoke on Georgia, the people that lived there, the Asiatics that lived in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and along that what they so-called Bible Belt. And it would always...
Now you see why they call it the Bible Belt? They're the grand protectors
Exactly.
of Christian creed, Niceno-Constantinopolitan creed, having nothing to do with Jesus at all. Jesus is a front
Exactly.
for the Ku Klux Klan operatives under the European Spanish Inquisition hegemony operations under Unum Sanctum and the Doctrine of Discovery. Remember the Trail of Tears?
Absolutely.
Oh, great, continue.
And it would always dawn on me that these events would continue to happen in our community, and they would know of who was the perpetrators, but there was nothing was done about this. And the last episode...
Now let's back up, slow down. Why was nothing done?
Because there was a part of it.
Exactly.
There was a part of it. And when you look back hindsight, they were a part of the entire... It was like they were put in place that they're going to be the ones to pump the fear into the Asiatics, to keep them in fear, to keep them in line, to keep them worshiping this so-called Jesus. You're going to pray harder to try to come out of this, but we're going to put these people in that position to do that to these people in this southern area. Where it was called the missing and murdered children of Atlanta, where there was a host of Asiatic children being
and they blamed it on Williams.
they blamed it on Wayne Williams, but I can recall as a child going to school, they tried to detour our school bus, and they couldn't detour our school bus, but I believe that the bus driver purposely took our bus towards that crime scene where the young girl was roped up against a tree. And everyone said, this man did not do that.
No,
And the uprising was becoming strong. And then all of a sudden you see where they put all these so-called black leaders in charge to try to cool the people down, because it was starting to be
501c3 operators.
Right, it was starting to be, now it's time to mobilize and get at them. You know, it's time to fight. And all of a sudden you have the leaders that want to bring you out and want you to march and want you to pray hard and want you to. And so, you know, when you sit back and think about it, it's like they're part of the coup.
Political placebo.
Right.
That's what they are.
They're part of the
Political
entire
placebo.
coup as well. They have gotten paid to keep their people
Yes.
in a state of subjugation as well.
Yes, and if you do any research on every one of those so-called civil rights leaders, you will discover that they're 32 and 33 Freemasons. All of them. Martin Luther King, Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, all of those are 32 and 33 Freemasons in secret, go to a lodge with a Moorish name, got a Moorish fez, and come out and pump Christianity.
Yeah, because, you know, being shot, our Asiatic boys being shot in the street, that wasn't new to us. The things I see today, those are things that I saw growing up all my life.
Yeah.
Being shot in the street by the cops.
Yeah.
You know, being beat up and harassed by the police.
Now remember this, and everybody must remember this, and write this down because you're going to do research. The people that they call policemen are not law officers.
Right.
They are members of one of the world's largest European terror organizations called the Gangs of New York, that started in Harlem. And that's when you think about the Pacific India Company, trading company, came to Manhattan, stealing our lands, etc. And their job was to go in and to force people into labor camps, to murder people and to steal their lands and to steal Harlem and that area for the Europeans from the Asiatics. And they went into contracts with the owners of the United States Service Corporation registered in Puerto Rico to terrorize the people. And this is where the tradition of them murdering Asiatics on the street come from and why they don't go to jail. And people who don't know the history keep saying, how can these law officers do this to the people? They're not law officers, they're commercial mercenaries. Write that down and don't forget it. They're commercial mercenaries.
And they made a movie about that too.
Oh yeah, but I'll tell you, and the point that I'm making is that all of these things are connected. And our people generally are naive to it. And its protection foundation is the Democratic Party. It belongs to the Klan. And the Republican Party that is operative, they just secretly are called what you call rhinos. They're all demons. They're from the demo platform, setting up the operations of the Unum Sanctum policy for the United States Corporation. This is why I tell you, when you look at this 1868, remember they closed the Freedmen's Bureau, the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, 1868. And also when they converted, and this is why these things are important, legally, not lawfully, the designation of person to the United States Service Corporation that bankrupted. And they've been since then pumping and promoting the United States as the country, to the point that people nowadays think that the United States is a country. The United States is not a country. It's a private corporation occupying Morocco. And the republic that was set up between the Moors and deists, who were John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Madison, etc., Thomas Jefferson, they were not Christians, they were deists, was the legitimate political platform for the Union to stop the hundreds of years wars between the Muslims and the Christians. It was overthrown. That's what the coup d'etat against Lincoln was all about. Once you understand this, all of the politics will fall in place. You'll understand everything, even why they murdered Kennedy. You may not know the details, but you'll know all of this. And then you can look at any politician or any so-called leader guide and notice that the different subject matters that they choose to present to the public, and you can know what their agendas are. Why? Because you're thinking on multiple levels now, like the priesthood do in ruling you. So they can't hide from you. That's why they don't want you to have this information, because it will open up your pineal gland. And you will not be blind anymore. They need people to operate under the mind control of what is called blind faith, whether you're claiming Islam, Judaism, or Christianity. That's their goal, to keep you in that state of mind. Are we clear?
Yes, clearly.
The job of Noble Drawley is to bring you out of that mentality and take you to higher planes of life. The job of anyone who's trying to help is to do the same thing and to bring you into or back into the constitutional fold of government. Therefore, you must learn civics. You must learn. It's not an option. Are we clear? Now, and the people, you have geniuses among our people that don't develop because they're trying to survive. And by the time that they even start to develop, they're going on the way to the grave. And by that time, the Jesuit order comes and steals all their property anyway. And that's how they operate. Our job, being Moorish American, is to stop that economic bleeding. Are we clear? How do we stop it? Like the prophet said, by teaching you to be yourself. You can't be yourself if you don't know yourself. You can't be yourself if you don't know the history. You can't start fixing things if you don't know what got you to where you are today. And these meetings, we are limited in what we can give you. So we try to give you certain focal points so that you yourself can stop wasting your time looking at stupid series movies of who's filling somebody's buns and start actually studying and start solving your own problems. That knowledge will bring you together. You don't need to argue, no, we really need to get together. When you're saying unity, as far as big families are concerned, you're saying nationality. Unity on the you say nationality, people who don't understand it don't get it. But them same people will go out and talk about we need unity. No, you need nationality. The unity comes with it. And the constitutions and treaties that are in place already before you were born that preserve your rights that you was knocked off of. You know, really, and the deal, these are known factors. These are not unknown factors. It's people who know it have been selling you out. And it's true, and it's uncomfortable, and people over the years have been so worried about protecting the images and the legacies of men and women who have been designated as our leaders that they are willing to hide this information and hide the fact that most of these people have been compromised. But once you dispense the knowledge, you can figure it out yourself. You know how to say, once you understand how to bake and cook, you know what I mean? You already kind of know that nobody can fool you and give you a cookie and tell you it's a cake. But if you don't, but they both go. But if you don't know the rules, you know, you have people squabbling, talking about their opinions, arguing. Well, that's because they don't understand dough, yeast, and how things work. But you get a bunch of people that know how to cook, they may not like the way in basic fundamental constitutional principle or civics and government structure, most of their governmental problems, even in organizations, can be solved quickly. The reason why you have the confusion is because half the people don't know the rules. And then the people who know the rules want to play leader girl and leader guy. Instead of teaching them and letting the cream rise to the top, meaning those who are really qualified, who got the spirit for fixing things to really rise. Because mother always gives us what we need. It's just that people suppress and they play nepotism and partiality. And so they block information in order for they can have Grand Chief Bibelfetcher been in the seat for 59 years back then, and Senator Bosnato Dinkle, you know, been in there for 80 years type stuff. And they corrupted and everything. When the deal they only supposed to sit in their seats a few years, and somebody's supposed to be groomed because it's supposed to rotate in order to keep it honest. This is why Jefferson always said, warned about the people, and he said when these politicians start making a career, because they're going to get corrupt, he said, take them out of them offices, take them in the backyard, lie them against the fence, and shoot their asses. Said that. But because they didn't do that, here you go. And that's the truth. And you got to take that same consideration in any organization that controls people's estates, their birthright, and the finance. That's better than killing a few people that go corrupt along the way. You take them leader guys, and that's what the ropes and the guillotines is really for. It's for them. And they haven't been used, that's why the world is suffering. And you can start, because they're all priests. If you start right there, and start, you know, when they have them storms and them trees fall down, you know, cut some for firewood and take the sticky ones and make some spears with them and get a sledgehammer and go through the neighborhood, get all the priests and start staking their damn hearts. And watch how quickly the darkness rises out of these communities. Vampires you didn't know were vampires. Now that's the real truth. And I don't say that lightly. I'm saying, and I know people ain't gonna do that. I'm not really advocating that, but just saying. But really, and it might sound extreme, but when you think about the many babies that are served in hamburger joints every day, and the average person don't even know they're eating their own babies. And how many wealthy women are smiling with baby oil on their lips, and your most expensive makeup is made by babies, human babies, and that's the real truth. And a lot of your wealthy Europeans who are vampires, I think at this time it's around $8,000 a liter for adrenochrome, that they call it. That's one of the names they've given it, where they torture children and take their blood and they sell it and they drink it.
It's a certain chemical.
And that's the truth. And so when you see the high priest doing the thing where, come on up here, and they give you a wafer and say, this is Jesus' body, and this is his blood and stuff. They do that for real in the chambers. That's just the ritual. So they're telling you what they've been doing, so you ain't like you can fake like you don't really get it. They've been doing that from the door, from day one. Roe versus Wade was, I think it's around 69. I apologize for those who are scholars if I got the date wrong, but I think it's around 1969 when they passed Roe versus Wade, and this is where they justified murdering the children under the guise of abortion, because they needed more bodies for adrenochrome, and they could get rid of after they steal the organs, they could get rid of the bodies at the hamburger joints. So they've been putting, I guarantee you, I ain't speculating, that if any of you are chemists whatsoever, whether you go in the supermarket, or whether you go in any of your major outlets where they give you 2 burgers for $5, that you got human DNA in all of the flesh, and it's baby flesh. And that's true, and as a matter of fact, there's suits going on outside of this country, and there's suits going on in this country that they're suppressing for people who found it out. That's where your 142 average 1,000 children go missing every year, just under the jurisdiction of the United States Service Corporation. That's not even counting Canada. Are we clear?
After they finish trafficking?
Say that again?
After they finish trafficking them?
Yeah, after they rape them, steal their organs. The same when they put that bomb off the coast of Haiti, for the gold contracts, because that's what that was for, because they wanted the gold there and they wouldn't give them the gold contract. And they blew Haiti up and said it was tsunami. And they were stealing children. They used them in what you call care, C-A-R-E. And that's where they burned the children alive in their Christian rituals. They call it care. They've been doing that for hundreds of years. Some they call it nigger roast. And this is why, like like Christmas time when they had the Brazil nuts, they would call them nigger toes, because what the Christians would do, they would take the toes, the ears, and stuff as people that they burned at the stake as tokens. Now that's a fact. Now, so they steal the organs, they take the medulla, and they take the spinal cord, they take the medulla, take the pituitary gland, and they extract the melanin. And as a matter of fact, they use that to start making a pill that they call melatonin, that they've been selling for the last 2 years. And Europeans use that. And that's true. And the babies are in, now, aside from this, you know, so when you talk about the priesthood of the Democratic Party, etc., the Kaitos Ku Klux Klan, look up on your phone, child DNA found in hamburgers across the country, and secret suits going on, and see what you find out. Good.
I wanted to add, validity to what His Grace is saying. I had the great privilege back in '93. I went to a Moorish New Year's function from the Clock of Destiny. It was in Ohio. I got to meet great sage James Johnson Bey, who was a student of Charles Muslim Bey. He was responsible for continuing to put the Clock of Destiny in the work that you have. And I got to meet Sage Darrell Thomas Bey. I rest his soul, both of them. And also, I got to personally meet, some of you may have heard of her, the Empress Ghost in Hell. And I used to talk on a regular, I got to meet her personally, because we used to talk once a month. She had a book that was called Return of the Ancient Ones, and I was blessed once I left her. She had so many boxes to sell her books. I had the book, and I brought some back to Jersey, and I sold it for $50 a pop. Anyway, I want to highlight to what His Grace is saying, like he's giving you a report on that, about the babies. Well, let me tell you that I sat literally at her feet. It was like a convention like this in Ohio, and I literally sat in my recorder. She told, and it was actually in the book, so I'm trusting someone to put her book online, because I don't have it no more, and y'all need to get it. She, you know, was the Washington Moors, what have you, in the Louisiana area. So she was instructed by her grandmother and whatever that they had the deed, and her mother was a librarian. She told her, when I die, then go, and I hid it in the library. Don't go until I die. So mom died, the grandmother died with her, and then she went to go research it. So now, a lot of the heavy hitters, politicians and all, was giving her a lot of flack. Plus the KKK. Now, this is when riding on with the Grace said about the children. So she wanted to know what was happening. So she said, I gotta find out, because they were talking about they was gonna do all kinds of stuff. So she said, well, let me do this now. This woman was brave. She sat here and told me. She went and took some sheets, cut stuff out, and got some gloves, and found out in the woods where they was having their meeting. So she went in incognito, and she got up close. She said she got up close and got to the stage. It was about to begin their ceremony. And she said she got up close enough where they was about to begin the ceremony. And then so two of the clan members was like, all right, they were arguing. And they was about to sacrifice a baby. They were arguing because one of them had went to the orphanage and they were supposed to have an Asiatic baby, but they got a European baby. So they supposed to have a nigger baby. This is what I could do. He said, well, we just won't deal with this. And they began the ceremony, and she said she was up close, so she was there. She was able to hear their dialogue. She said when they started cutting that baby, she was soiling her what's name, and she had to get up out of there. So this her tone, she's watching this. They're sacrificing the baby. They can't leave. So I just wanted to add that to you.
They verify
what you say.
They've been doing that.
You know what I mean? And I got this from a woman that witnesses and told this story.
Yes.
So I just wanted to
highlight. But this is the deal. This is not unknown by any of these scholars or any of these politicians. And back to Tamara. The reason why nothing was done is because these are the people. The sheriffs and the reverends are dragons. You know, and people keep on, well, how come they don't do this? They've been killing these babies, and how come they don't solve this? Because the sheriffs and the reverends and the preachers are dragons. They're ghouls. There are the leaders of it, not just participants. And the sooner our people understand this, the sooner they'll stop being frustrated as why they cannot get justice in the so-called courts. They're not courts. They're auction blocks under unum sanctum. And the so-called Negro marching leader, reverend guys know it. Their job is to calm the sheeple while they get sheared, and they give them a cashmere coat to pacify them. That's why all your nigger reverends are semi-wealthy, stealing the widow's pennies.
And got huge churches.
This thing is uglier than people can begin to imagine. So Roe versus Wade, because this stuff was ugly, they got to justify the missing children every year, right? And you ever notice that with all the abortions going on around the country, you don't see no abortion grave sites, and you don't see the crematories getting these babies burned because they're going to the hamburger joints. See, so when this stuff blows out, the very people who are complaining been eating the babies.
Everybody missed that. That's in the Matrix too.
Okay, this is what this is why they
movies-
show you movies like Sterling Green and stuff like that, because they're actually telling you what they're doing to you to contaminate you, so that they can cause you to be in, of course, we know sin is the moon, but connotative sin, so that when they're brought to judgment for this, they can say that you did it too, to justify themselves. And this is why you see many Asiatics, contrary to what you used to see years ago, in years of 40 and 50 with canes and stuff and walkers. When 70 years old, they're supposed to be still playing basketball. And they don't get it. You know, and the younger generation don't know, so they don't have reference point. But those who are older, we already know that it was common to have 3 or 4 generations in the same house. You know, and grandmoms, what do you mean walking with a cane? Once in a while, but she tripped or something like that. But, you know, the things that we used to have to worry about was whether they got pneumonia or something. We wouldn't hear about no cancer and polio and all this kind of stuff with our, you know. We was used to grandma, what are you doing in the garden and stuff. When we get sick, she was going to get white sash. You know, you had a cold or something like that. They deworm you according to the seasons. That was common. We didn't get sick, really. You know, all this sickness and stuff is contemporary with us. Yeah. And it's really, you know, I mean, if you don't have a reference point, people can talk about it, but unless somebody lives some generations, they haven't gotten the chance to see this and to make the comparison. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? They hear about it, but, you know, and a lot of times, even when you see it, you know, you don't think about it because you're busy, you know, living your life at the moment. But when you think, you know, you see this stuff, and you think way back, you know. And, you know, grandma, please, you just have to keep up with her. You know, it's really. And now you see people 40 and 50 years old with canes and walkers and stress and diabetes, all this weird stuff. That was not our sicknesses. And these people think they're doing better. Yep. Anyway, let's not go there. But the deal of it is, the Democratic Party is the Ku Klux Klan. And the Republican Party is the Ku Klux Klan pretending to support the Republican order of the Constitution. Coming after the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the split of the Whitmore Party, just reminding you, these are reference points, that's why I'm throwing them into you. And so when you're looking at, you know, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Greenville, North Carolina, see, because a lot of people talk about Tulsa, they don't talk about North Carolina. Do you understand? Same thing, this stuff was going on. They emphasize Tulsa, but they don't talk about the other areas on the land. They did the exact. They ain't your government. They're inquisitions who are imposturing as government since 1861. Ku Klux Klan Keutel's order of white camellia that's been murdering you under the Spanish Inquisition. It ain't racism, it's murder and genocide under sanctum policy of the European Spanish Inquisition against the Moors and Yahudi, who you keep calling Moors and Jews, both of which is you. And they've been stealing your identity, claiming to be Americans, they're not. And they're claiming to be Jews, and they're not. And they've been murdering you and stealing your birthright, which means they're living off your virtues. And people among you that look just like you, that claiming all kinds of titles in your so-called religious organizations, 90% of them are paid off to keep you asleep, and they're given Masonic degrees lesser than the Europeans to let them know why not to tell the truth and give them nice little comfortable jobs to kind of keep them compromised. Are we clear? All your big churches, the matrons of the churches are Eastern Stars and Doors. They pin them down because they're not the real mother, you are. And this is what Masonry in the general order is all about. Not Masonry, the knowledge, but those who are in the order that keep you asleep. Submitting to Kypros of the great circle under the popes of Rome. They're not your government, they're your enemies. That's what birthright theft is. Now, again, back to the issue, and we were talking about this earlier, Dr. Naira, where, when you're talking about people about nationalizing, and a lot of people be trying to convince people on the morality of it, of the historical fact, but not really telling them about the birthright theft, what it really means. Well, I'm telling you what it really means. And this is why when you really understand the issue of estate and status, why Noble Raleigh said to the Moors, if you don't do anything else, declare your nationality. Now, on the surface, people can take that statement a lot of ways, but not too serious. But once you get the history, you'll understand it. You'll understand it. And it gets deep and it gets ugly. And it gets uglier than ugly. So not to be alarmed, some things are presented. They are indeed beasts. But that don't make every European a beast. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Don't take it wrong. Don't judge Europeans as being that just because they're Europeans. Because every European doesn't necessarily act that way or even feel that way. However, they're under the arm of the protection of the order irregardless in order to maintain the order. Are we clear?
Right.
Go ahead.
Do you mind just sharing,
Push the button.
Do you mind just sharing a few resources that we can use in reference to how to operate according to the moon phases?
Oh, like say for instance, simply start looking at yourself differently. The same but differently. All right, start respecting your cycle. Start respecting them 7 days when you start spotting. Start recognizing that the priesthood who told you that women were dirty and don't speak of God when you're on your monthly and stuff like that. Well, that's the most holy period because at that time you can produce the bodies and you can also be gateways for other spirits that don't have to take bodies. Just be good. Meaning that you want to solve the earth's problems, start using that womb correctly. When you see woman, that's what makes woman dangerous. Woman is dangerous in this sense. She's also referred to by those who really know nature, the God of good and evil. Meaning that however she uses the womb is what it is here, because she is the stargate. Meaning that if a woman is negative, she will produce negative offspring. That's true. When you cycle, and that egg comes from either side of the fallopian tube and rests in the uterus, right at the mouth of the uterus. That's the ankh that you see in ancient Hikupta. That's why that's called a sistrum. That's why it symbolizes government and regeneration. But remember, they do not teach women the applied sciences of number 9. Mainly are women. That's your culture, but you were taken from that. And the Europeans took it on in order to rule you with your own stuff. You know, like when you go to big churches and big organizations and you see the badges on the back of them cars and you'll see the head of a sphinx and you see a Moorish sword, two-edged sword above the head of the sphinx. That symbolizes the subjugation of the Moabite woman. They get y'all, they got us. Right? When you're under the influence of Constantine under the Christian black codes, 90% of the time you'll run your own man out the house. A lot of our women who really don't understand what's really going on, thinking that a lot of the Asiatic men are running after other women, not recognizing it's not so much that or thinking that their sons don't want them because when they get financed or something, they get some European woman or some other. No, it's not that. They're usually running away from a destructive woman who's either trying to emasculate them or destroy them under the Christian black codes. And they do it consciously and unconsciously. However, when they decide they're doing it because she has the power to make and destroy. This is areas of conversation that most men won't have, because most men aren't honest. When I say not honest, their pride and their sense of whatever their masculinity is, most of them will never be honest and have this conversation. A lot of reasons, ego, they don't want their women not to want them, and they don't want their women to necessarily know what they really feel, and then they don't want their women to reject them because they're not exactly clear about what they really feel. Because the woman raised them, and they love their mother and their wives at the same time, often not feeling wanted or loved themselves. Then they see other nations, they see where their women support their men. They'll see like Asiatics, they'll see the men and women walk together and then they get their women and their women seem to be trying to destroy them. But they're operating under the Christian black codes, consciously and unconsciously. Then they'll give Reverend Pigfoot more honor than they give their husbands who busting his ass. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And they don't talk about it, but I'm telling you what, I'm a barber. As an example too, when I was in the shop, I was in the first chair, and I was directly across the street from Nellie's beauty parlor. I learned a lot just there. I didn't know. I was naive too. But the point that I'm saying is, a lot of things that men really feel over a period of time, they'll talk in the barbershop that they will talk nowhere else. And after a while, you begin to get a feel of what's going on. You start recognizing their naivety and your own naivety. And we men are naive in a lot of ways. We really are. But a lot of our pain that we don't talk about with our mates, they'll talk about in the shop. And I'm being honest with you, most of our men that run after other women, a lot of our women be saying, these brothers, as soon as they get some money, they go get a European woman, blah, blah. 90% of the time, if you really examine them, they're not running after them women, they're running away from Asiatics with that dead culture, that dead Jesus culture that they put on their men, that their men really don't like, but they gotta go along with, and give their money to that pimp that everybody in the world knows is a pimp. Just up there and they be talking about Jesus first, and they know they ain't no damn Jesus. And to get along, they gotta stick with that stuff. And then they go through these demon rituals, rolling all over the place, making fools of themselves. And then you gotta go along with it, and all the perverts be there too. All of the perverts be right there. And usually men don't talk about it, but except when they come to shop. And then after a while, with other problems that they have, struggling with the society, and then watching a lot of them who really bust their butts being used and abused, and as fast as they can get away, they run. Give them an opening, they getting out of there. And there are women be thinking they're running after some European with some blonde hair. And women can't touch our women. It's just that their head don't match the body. They got these demon Christian black codes in them, groomed into them, and they will destroy them. Destroy them, absolutely. But men don't talk about it. They cry alone. Then they come out and, put on this image of muscles and strength that really is artificial. So that's another truth that I'm just telling y'all. Because a lot of these men get accused of running after European women. No, they're running away from theirs. That's the truth. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody is sensitive, and nobody wants to say it. And any of you all really know that have been around and really studied it, nobody talks about it, but if you examine it, you know damn well that's what it is. But nobody, it's like one of those sacred cow things. Everybody know, but nobody talk about it. But the problem of it is that because it's not addressed, there's a lot of assumptions that it's something else that it's not. And it's unfair to a lot of good men, and it's unfair to a lot of good women. And a lot of good women have suffered because a lot of men have been jaded. Because women have been on the dark side, using them Christian black codes, destroying their own family. And running their men out. Not that all of them are worthy to be there anyway, I'm not saying that. But I'm just telling you what a lot of men won't say. Because I'm honest about a lot of stuff that a lot of people won't talk about. But that's the problem with our community that really needs to be fixed. The sooner our women give up Reverend Pigfoot, pimp, pervert, long dicker fella, the sooner they'll keep more men in their house. But they won't give up that fake stuff that they keep putting on their own family. Then they put their sons in and get them all messed up and then wonder why they don't know how to treat women. They keep delivering their own children to these perverts because they run around saying Jesus. Messing their minds up, messing these children up, and then wonder why when their men get a little older and get tired of that stuff, they run as soon as they can find somebody to go past civilized. And be unhappy too. But they gotta fake it. Islam, give it a mic, that's all I can do. And again, like I say, they'll put their ego in it, instead of just really talk about the component truth. Go ahead, your brother.
Islam, I have not much to say, but I want to let you know. Islam, I don't have that much to say, but I just want to let you know I was in tune in harmony with you for the Treaty of Verona, Article 3. As far as the preachers, what they do to our people, it's all a game. And I just also wanted to ask you about if you were familiar with Canon Law 2056.
Schoolers.
Canon Law 2056 says when canon laws are the laws that come up out of the Vatican, and that's the whole system because these corporations belong to the Vatican.
Yes, they do.
And canon law 2056 says when you, and I needed Taj's help on this because I've been studying for a while, it says when you go before a magistrate as a live soul, they're supposed to let you go then without any hassle stuff, and the trust ceases. The Sesquippede trust ceases to be. And they said, Canon Law 2057 says, I can read it in a few, if they don't do that, they're in a violation of their office. They should be removed from the office immediately.
Now, Dr. Naila, and see where I recognize that book across the room?
Yes, Canon, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, brother. Now, and remember this, whenever you're dealing in law and you're dealing in explanation of jurisprudence, You never leave the number because it's unqualified. You go into the text. In the challenge of jurisdiction, a number presented in the argument and not explained where the common man or woman can comprehend it is unconstitutional in principle. Thus, the jurisdiction of that claim is dismissed. Just a reminder, but this is for everyone else. This is in the principle of jurisdiction and challenging jurisdiction, which means, like, say, for instance, if they send you an instrument in the mail and say that you're in violation of section 205 of some code and don't have that written out, that is dismissible. They've been getting away with it because our people have not been taught civics. You understand? Because the numbers does not mean it's a designation. That's digital placement. That is not the rule or the law. The substance of the rule of law written out for the common man is the rule. So when you say canon law and then quote the number, and that's a training of how they present people to present things, but understand that's incorrect. And this is another reason why our people are behind, because they're not taught the truth about how these things should be presented. And what we want to do here at the House of Reawakening Minds is reverse that trend of deliberated misinformation by the priesthood. Are we clear? Canon law. While you're sitting there,
He was talking about canon law,
well, Dr. Naila is Dr. Wolf, but I'm just saying, we try to keep some stuff here so we can make reference. And what we also try to do is encourage you to invest in your families and build your libraries back up. Because if we make reference, we'll give you reference. And we know that even though there's a lot of different subject matter, if you start researching, you can take people who don't even have a high school education and make them scholars within a couple of years, just by teaching them fundamental rules and getting them on the path. You know, and take them beyond the degrees that they'll learn in any lodge, that they pay thousands of notes for, and then take deaf oaths. You know, and that's really our goal, to liberate the people from the priesthood. But we count on you to be sincere to your own self, to love yourself enough, to be brave enough to take the step to read again and to challenge things, accept nothing without examination, not even what we say. Do you understand? But be sincere, and nature herself will come to your aid and open you up, will stimulate your memory. You know, this is again symbolized by Dawood going into the stream with the 5 smooth stones, and he takes one and puts it in a cow eye and puts it 360 degrees above his head. That symbolizes the tassel. And the degrees, 360 degrees, and strikes Goliath in the forehead. That's the termination of the nerve that comes from the thalamus, from the dark side of the brain, terminates right here. So that also symbolizes the opening of the middle eye, or the single eye. So the Goliath thing is actually the Goliath within. You know, and you activating the pineal gland. So a lot of the stories in the Bible are actually Kabbalistic. You know, not real beings, Kabbalistic. And so that's what that symbolizes. And so what we're trying to do is stimulate you to be brave enough to examine yourself and to recognize that the divine sent you here with all that you need, and that no man can save your soul. He has not the capacity. For the soul is perfect even in the bosom of a fool. Do you understand? You're just here for experience. Other men may be sent or aid to help you, to stimulate you, but he can't do anything for you. But take up your time. You know, so they can share while traveling. That's it. All right? So you're sent here with the tools you need. And whatever lessons that you chose to learn, and whoever mother and father that you chose to come through the gate with, understanding that that's a contract that you made with on the other side. You know, it's just that like the veil is pulled so that you can focus on your lessons today. That's really what it's about. You know, that's why they say in the Quran that there is no failure for the human spirit. Allah's leading on, victory is assured. And that the ruler of the solar stars is your guide. Now, you notice that it's also said that in your prayer, it says, Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and day. Then you look in chapter 1, it says, the solar stars. That's cosmology. So once you deal with that wheel, you start dealing with the refinement of that guidance, then you take the mathematics that don't lie. Do you understand? And then you're more cognate of your guidance. Then you deal with your compass and your square that you see in masonry, which is called the carpenter's tools. That's why I say Jesus was a carpenter. And so by those same principles, you guide or navigate your life. Not by beliefs, but by mathematical geometry of the movement of the planets, for they are sure. And so this is why I said, like, they divided the night from the day, etc. So you're dealing with your compass that deals with the upper world, your square that deals with the underworld, and then they're balanced. And then through the center, you'll see G, or geometry, which is also the God principle. It's not a being, it's a transitive verb. And you learn how to use it, you see? And you guide your life accordingly, you see, toward the shore. And that's masonry, mother and son. That's what masonry is. You know, so you're dealing with Isis, you know, or Set, you know, and Horus, or mother and son. Or the Christians will have it as Mary and Jesus. That symbol that you see, that's masonry, mother and son, and the study of ma and son study, masonry. All clear? I'm just telling you the truth and keeping it simple, so you don't get spookied up about what you see out there that people ain't telling you. Islam.
You spoke of, men running away from women to, Europeans and so forth.
And what I'm saying, they don't always talk about it.
Yeah, I get that, but
Yeah.
what I wanted to contrast that with rather is the fact that in the last at least year or so, maybe my eyes are just open to something that I overlooked, but I see so much in advertising and media that seems to be depicting.
Now they're
They depict
you see
Asiatic
all
women
commercials.
Everything it's to the point where I want to stick my finger in my mouth and throw up
Yeah.
because I'm like, if I see another one of these.
Now let's talk about the engineering. This is the engineering. So now you bring up a fact. Now let's talk about what's going on. All right, when you understand what's going on, the Negro Yavera Arebo experiments of the Yucatan and of Patagonia, the problem that they discovered was the introduction of the hybriding brought about gonorrhea, syphilis, and tuberculosis. That never existed in the human family before the hybrid Roman was brought about, which is symbolized in Dr. Moreau's Island, the movie. Moreau was French for more. And in the book of genetics, Genesis, where Rebecca was with child, and the divine, upon approach by Isaac, and he said, my wife is barren, can you hook her up, to the God principle, to the divine. And then she became pregnant, and while little emphasis is put on twins, it's more put on the nature or the character. And so Allah says to him in relationship to Rebecca, because she was troubled, and they were battling in her womb, and she was, you know, it was like she was really catching it.
Yeah.
So she went back to the divine and said, I'm so troubled, you know, in my womb. And he says, in your womb, there are two different nations, two different manner of people. And then you see one came out holding the heel of the other, and he was ruddy red and hairy. That's the Roman. Roman is Romantic or Gaelic for red man. And this is why the European was referred to as the redneck. Then you have the issue of the birthright theft. The sale of the birthright for a bowl of red pottage is telling you the history. Then the European repeats it in The Wizard of Oz. And then this is also why, has much reason why they call Matoaka the potentess of the land of virgins and Mary. Virgin Mary, Virginia, Maryland, the split, and then he put Alexander the Great, Alexandria, Virginia, and they put George Washington's monument there, an obelisk, and he changed all the estates over, you see? And then they called Matoaka Rebecca. Then they set up that pyramidal design of Jamestown, Virginia, under Prince James, who now is called King James, who did the transliteration for the popes of Rome under commission to alter the books out of their original form for conquest of the world. Keitel's Ku Klux Klan, Democratic Party. It's not a secret. It's just that people don't have eyes to see. And those who know ain't telling. Now, deal. The cure for the diseases and insanity was to mate the Asiatic sons with the blonde-haired Germanic tribe. That's what that's all about. They're about to genetically disappear. So they're serving them up. This is also why the Queen offered Megan about $30 million now leave, now that she's produced a child. Now they want her out.
Oh, they do replenish the gene pool.
Okay, but if you understand, if you understand the genome operations of the genetic experiments of Yakub Cushitis, none of this is surprising to you. It's the people who don't know that cannot read the politics. We're giving you the highest degrees of masonry, openly. We're not hiding anything. Because it's your knowledge. Masonry is Moorish knowledge. Not the club. Are we clear? And you're the great Masonic secret. The more you understand why I say it's problem, I'm going to say there shall be no secularism in Islam. Masters don't get Islam, masters get rulership under the Pope, thinking they got Islam. But they must be liberated too. You know what I mean? And the best way to do it is just simply tell the truth. And this is why also, like Raleigh said, in relationship to the Moors, he said, the Negro problem is your problem. Some of the Europeans are helping me. The Negro problem is your problem. Why are not you helping me? I'm trying to help this government, and they do not understand. Much has been misrepresented by the works of Neil Drawley, but nobody wants to go into that. Why? Because it overthrows many of the institutions that are totally misrepresented, including the Moorish Science Temple of America being misrepresented. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Noel Drawley came as a savior for humanity, not some club. Islam.
There's a question, online question. What principle is Roman media using that our media isn't using?
Is it
Media is now depicting Asiatic women with European men
this is subliminal
It's not
because
just commercials,
they're
it's also the
encouraging.
shows, the TV shows, everything, yeah.
Let's put it this way.
But they're asking what
Let's put it this
they're
way.
doing that, I guess.
Let me put it this way. The European women are trying to move you out of the way permanently. And that's the truth. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to do what you call the capstone. The capstone is that they have conquered you already with the Christian doctrine, because the Asiatic woman has almost totally embraced the church and totally embraced the lie about Jesus and totally put her children under the spell of Constantine, under the guise of being Christ-like. Remember, guys, she's pretty much run her man out. And most of them are there are either still there or disconnected. I mean, they're there, but they're disconnected. They're totally they're disconnected. This is the time for them to complete the conquest, because they want to kill you off. So the last of the vestige of the men that are sticking around, if they can pull them, now you're open. You're like a rabbit out there by yourself. Then he won't come and kill you. I'm just telling you what they intend to do.
But what
It doesn't have to be.
But what they're doing, actually, I'm saying, they're showing us, Asiatic women, like they're depict every time you look, one is with a European man. So to me, it looks like
She's the cure.
That's the trading place.
right. That's the trade. So I'm saying
That's the trading.
it's
That's
like
the
they're trying
trading
to
place.
subliminally.
That's like blunt. That's
Yeah.
meaning it's going beyond subliminal.
Yeah, it's like in your face.
It's going beyond subliminal. Almost all the commercials, they'll have an Asiatic man there eating popcorn, they're looking at TV, and the European woman is sitting next to them, and they're talking like they casually do, when actually they look like they ain't got nothing in common, but they're chilling. You know, and then they have the European women acting like sisters. You know, and vice versa. But we already know, those who know about the Ibrida experiments in the Yucatan and Patagonia know that and knew it was coming. Do you understand? It is two things. It is both the cure and it's also the conquest. Now, so you got to kind of look what's really happening. Now, in order to, like we always tell people, to minimize the bleeding, we can't stop it, but we can minimize it. We're trying the best that we can to bring consciousness. Like you see on the questionnaire, you'll see Noble Drawley have the Asiatic woman, right, on the questionnaire, right? And she's unconscious. And it's 9 drops of boom. That's the applied science of the number 9, which means she is the cure. She is the cure for the human condition, but she's unconscious. Do you understand? You know, he's telling a lot of things that people really understood graphic science. But most people look at that and they're busy worshiping Noble Drawley rather than really looking at what he's presenting to you. And then those who know the science ain't teaching the science. Do you understand? And then they mad at people like Taji Guy if we're exposing, because a lot of these people spent thousands of notes in lodges to get this information, and they don't get it as much as I'm telling you all openly. And it makes them also irrelevant. So they got all these clubs with the greasy lights and stuff, and they getting all the finance from the people and ain't teaching them crap. They come in here to the House of Reawakening Minds, they're getting far past 33 degrees. They may not recognize it, but I ain't nothing like that, but I already know sooner or later it's going to dawn on them. And some of them will go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and that spirit will hit them, and they would have traveled and not even know that they've traveled. but they'll come back a different spirit. And then these women are going to start producing champions. Now they're all in trouble. That includes them Romans, and that includes their nigger marching 33-degree reverend fake don't love Jesus perverts who've been getting over all these generations. Going to be moved out the way. And all of the movement won't be comfortable either. However, back to the point. The deal of it is that about 7 generations in the genetic code that the European, or i.e. really the Albion, will fade out. And if they don't get some of that Asiatic energy, they will literally die out. There's no reason why the Nagans over there in the so-called royal family, self-breeders type stuff. Just want to throw that at you. So the deal is, it's already written that must take place. Now some will feed into that, both for the positive side and the negative side, but I'm telling you what it is, it was already written to be done. So that's the truth. Now, but what my position is, I don't subscribe to sitting back and watching them trying to take off. And then our women themselves are feeding into it because they didn't bought into this church thinking that it's Jesus, not knowing that they're destroying their own family. All high priests know it though, and all politicians know it. Go ahead.
I wanted to backtrack just slightly, but it's still what you're saying. I guess what the person was asking, what media they're using the Europeans are using that we're not using. This is where I go into telling y'all there's 7 dominant laws of suggestibility. What the Europeans are using through the media, and what Father keeps telling you, and now it's more the keyword, because the only more they kept saying is social engineering that they're using. And they perfected it and called it black ops. So I'm going to read this off, and then I'm going to let His Grace get back to what he's saying. So some of you can just review some of the sessions that I've done. There are 7 universal laws of suggestibility or hypnosis. And I told you it's the law of reverse action. That's, reverse psychology. And then it's the second law of repetition. So when they're showing these commercials with Dr. Naila was singing, remember, they keep getting played over and over. So it's repetition.
Translation, mind control.
Right. Then it's the next law of dominance. And then it's the
Anno Dunk Domini. So that's what AD means.
And then it's
the year of domination.
Right. And then it's the law of delayed action.
Subliminal suggestion or the seed planting.
Correct. Then it's the law of association.
Yes. Attachment, betting.
And then it's the 6th law, which is very important because the last one I'm giving you is hidden. The 6th law is used by a lot of musicians and also hypnotists, especially stage hypnotists or hypnotherapists.
Called semantics.
And it's the law of will and imagination. And I always give the example of it. But when you get the person's internal dialogue to conflict, when you're talking about will, meaning you have the willpower to do something. But then when a person changes the situation, they get you to get your imagination to conflict with your will. And the dominant basic law of that law is once you get the person's internal dialogue of will and imagination to conflict, the imagination is going to win every time. Every time. And the last one, and I always refer to y'all to do your own study on this one, is the law of hypnotic rhythm, or it's called compensation. And I always entreat you to read, it's on YouTube, it's a book in audio. What is it again? With the devil.
Outwitting the devil.
Outwitting the devil. I love that term. I love you so much. Thank you. I want y'all to hear that. It's about a 2.5 hour audio on book. But it'll give you a more of a understanding of the last one, of law of hypnotic rhythm / law of compensation. So this is what His grace is telling you, and I just gave you a pinpoint, which He had said earlier, how I gave you some of the metaphysics stuff on how to recognize and utilize it. And that's when you now take that metaphysical knowledge, and then you go back into the jurisprudence and operation that His grace has given you. And so this is what He's saying. What I just gave you right there, condensed, that is what is being played with Dr. Naila was saying, and the person was reaching and asking His grace. So I'm going to turn it back over to him, and again, we'll talk. I know we'll talk afterwards, and then a lot of you can review on the videos and stuff that I've covered that. Thank you again, Your Grace. I just want to take a moment.
Yeah, appreciate that, because even the effect of that, right? Now, the Klan Acts, as an example, were designed to discourage the open use of force and violence directed towards persons branded as blacks and Negroes who were trying to assimilate into the contractually sealed political and economic Christian union. And that psychology operations, you know, that's assimilation. Dr. Hannibal was explaining to you all even some points that he was giving to you last week. And this is how it's politically activated. This is the actions in the politics. Are we clear? And logically, and this is where the advantage is, because if you understand, if you have an understanding what the dark priesthood is using, you can counter it. But when you don't know what you're up against, you have limited tools. See, this is why we got to get our people out of the mystery systems, because they don't know they're under attack. You know, they think they're dealing with belief systems, and they are aiding in their own demise and don't know that they are. In other words, our hypocrisy has been so deeply ingrained for so many generations that we don't know that we're actually operating against ourselves, even when we think that we're trying to get out of it, by simply not knowing what we're dealing with. Are we clear? So the Klan Acts were designed to discourage the open use of force and violence. This is where they do what you call covert activities, right? And so the assimilation activities by Negroes and blacks is one of the great motivating factors of the Ku Klux Klan and similar Christian organizations. And the passage of the Klan Acts by the Union of States Congress, however, caused some of the complaining and festering distrust among the illiterate slaves, blacks, to wane. Public, quote-unquote, faith and the system in the system, quote-unquote, was tentative but largely restored. And this is where they keep having the Negro leader guys coming out to calm you down after they screw you and do things to you. And they always use Jesus and the guilt trip to get you back in under your riddling mentality. Now, with hope and quote-unquote faith somewhat restored, not that there was any choice, the hopeful, branded blacks and Negroes would willingly and happily fight in wars against their own people, falsely believing that they were Christian citizens of the Union. And this is where you have these people, as soon as they have a job for 3 weeks, they go into service, thinking that the European will give them some kind of recognition by claiming to be Christians and going around the world to and fro the earth, devouring the nations, keeping the European empowered, and come back here and do those Negro marches and prayers led by their Negroite civil rights leader, reverend guys, who they think love Jesus, not knowing that they secretly serve Constantine, knowingly, under the secret treaty of Roman Article 3. That's why we give you these reference points, because these people always will pretend to be dumb. Oh, well, we didn't know. Well, you know, they didn't know all this, but they know Jesus. They don't know what's in front of their face, but they know God and when He's going to take your sandwiches or not. When Moses got his ass kicked type stuff. But, you know, they don't know this. You know, I'm serious. You know, I mean, you talk about the netherworld, but they don't, you know, because they're caught, really. You know, it's like me being a carpenter, you know what I mean? You know, I can fix it, the shorts and everything and stuff like that, but I don't know what a battery is that goes in the flashlight. Yeah, right. you know, you buy that, you out the damn lunch. And this is pretty much what they've done to the masses. They talk about the mysteries of God, the mysteries of the Quran, the mysteries of the devil. When God's going to kick the devil's ass on Thursday, sell your bicycle and stuff, we're going to Mount Zion and the apostasy take place, and then they don't know the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed is the official name of Christianity, they be pumping. And then you collect millions of dollars for it and got all kinds of bank accounts all over the damn place. Yeah, right. People buy that. And the only reason why they start playing dumb, because now people are starting to get informed and start recognizing not only these whether they're taking it with those pennies, you'll be thinking about how to exercise your thumbs so you can press your Adam's apple to the back of their head with a nice chokehold. Like, really? He trying to throw water on you and you be trying to axe him. Bless your child, sin no more. You know, you be swinging an axe. And they'll be deserving it too. Really, they, you know, when the world really finds out the stuff that these people really been doing, you think this stuff is ugly, you ain't touched nothing yet. They've done so many cruel things to children that your mind cannot begin to embrace it. All in the name of Jesus. And you've been paying them. Anyway, now look at this. And remember I told you pay attention to dates? Reacting to rising social unrest, the Union of States Congressional Committee sat during the summer of what? 1870. Calendar, recording 13 volumes of testimony on the social, economic, and political conditions in the South. And the Union Congress was caught in a political conflict of interest position. They were having to probably pacify the displaced blacks, Trail of Tears and stuff, and at the same time avoid constitutional confrontation with their own Union state citizenry. That's the fake argument of the Civil War, which had nothing to do with liberating our people, fighting over the spoils to whom they were obligated. For further references, see the report of the Joint Select Committee. So write that down, report of the Joint Select Committee. United States of America, 42nd Congress, second session. And logically, those who are listening, we give these reference points, please take reference so that you can start doing some research and understand a lot of statements that we make that people who don't know history and law may misjudge where we're coming from or not really understand. Because they don't have reference points, you understand? So when they don't have reference points, it's not important to them, but it affects their everyday life. The problems that they're having economically and political are tied absolutely to this. And they keep you from it by paying nigger leaders to sit around and talk about racism and prejudice, and it sounds good and everybody starts talking racism and prejudice. They're dummies. The placebo is the local reverends and pastors who keep saying they love Jesus, and these people fall for it, who keep taking their children to them. These same people, believing that these people are really working for Jesus. They're working for Constantine. Under Article 3 of the Secret Treaty of Rome. And that's just the truth. Get over yourself. Don't get mad, learn something. And don't get mad at Taji for telling the truth. Do some research and prove me wrong. The next time y'all come, you'll be sharing information with me. But before you come, get a nice hot cup of tea so you're not pissed off. Because you're going to get mad. The more you study, you're going to get mad.
Yes.
You're going to get angry when you find out that people that you've trusted ain't the honorable people that you thought they were. And you won't be naive about it either. And you won't be letting them get away with talking about they didn't know. But you will know why they got a nice car and you don't. And stuff. Perverts. Anyway, we might continue this the next time we come. It's going to where, the questions that may come through from the audience, because these are things they need to know. But they need to know that both political parties that are operating at North America are the Ku Klux Klan. And this is why nothing goes in the favor of the people, and it never does. And it won't, as long as they're in them seats. So the real deal for you to do is learn the truth about their nationality and birthright and start taking your places among the affairs of men, and particularly enforcing Article 3 of that Constitution and Article 6. I want to thank you all for coming out here to the House of Reawakening Minds. We started late, so we're rolling late. But thank you for coming out. We had a little nasty weather going on here. But I'm appreciating Dr. Naila Gilliam for the work that she's been doing in the background very often, and particularly those of you who are listening and those of you who are here. You've had the joyous and I think very rewarding opportunity to listen to her when she has her just off the cuff riding with Dr. G conversations with you. And believe me, a lot of good stuff comes out, because she's just like being like for real and 100. And for those of you who haven't had that opportunity, take the time to ride with Dr. G sometime. And believe me, it's really uplifting. She's blunt now because she be hitting on things that, because a lot of people think a lot of things, but a lot of times people don't have the real courage to examine or speak on them because they like to be liked. So a lot of times Dr. G will speak on things that other people will think about, but they ain't got the guts to talk about. And so she's appreciated for that. Tamara, you're appreciated for being in the background, making things work, producing and stuff like that. A lot of times, people see stuff, see things going on, and they think they see what they see, but they don't understand it's the people in the background that really make things work. And you're appreciated, so I give you a hand. Thank you all for coming out and supporting the House of Reawakening Minds. I hope and trust that we've done some good and that we've given you some nuggets of truth that can help you, and it can help you with your families, and also give you encouragement to understand constitutional principles and why you enforce it. Not because we say so, because that is the supreme law of the land, and is based in true fatwa, for Moore's law, for your redemption. All right? So anyway, I'm going to say have a grand evening. And those of you who are listening, take a ride with Dr. G sometime.
Office hours. I also now have office hours.
And come, say it
Office
again.
hours, too.
Oh yeah, and she got office hours. Matter of fact, give her the mic. Come on, please, you gotta drop this. You ain't getting that off. Give her the mic just for a few minutes. Give her the mic for just a few minutes.
Before we close out, we like once again in mind, where we are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and more science, and awakening experience for all ages. This Friday on March the 8th, our brother Abdullah Bey will be in the Chicago territory. So we will have the honor of having our brother Jamal Abdullah Bey from the Rhode Island territory that will be here on Friday, March the 8th. So please come out and tune in as well. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. G. She's going to talk to you about riding with Dr. G in her new segment called Office Hours with Dr. G. Let me tell you about the office hours. Let me tell you about that. I'm going to have to just let you know. Oh my God, that was a project that we almost killed each other in the office. Just to get the office together, we almost killed each other. Oh my gosh, she almost threw out the window. It was crazy. But we had fun. So let Dr. D explain to you about her new segment coming up called
Dr. G does not have a specific airtime, but I'm appreciative. Yesterday we did a 1-minute meditation on 2 words, more power, and more was spelled 2 ways, M-O-R-E and M-O-O-R, power. And a lot of those who were riding with me last Thursday were tuned in yesterday, and there were about maybe 28 people or so. And I went from doing the meditation to that almost a 1 hour, just the rambling office hours. But we'll be doing that probably on the Thursdays that you're not riding with me. I'm going to do office hours. So to give it some level of consistency, it always will be on a Thursday unless I do something spontaneous. And on the 3rd Thursday, of course, we'll be in the car, and the other Thursdays we'll be in the office.
All right. Thank you, Dr. G. Have a grand evening. And those who are listening, remember to support the House, because she's been making sure that them doors are open. And I want to thank you all for listening, and we trust that we've done some good, and if we've done some good, the mission is satisfactory. Have a grand evening.